The boy screams as his body transforms. His bones warp and twist as feathers emerge from his pores, and his skull sharpens into a long, hard beak. He's in a living nightmare. And who could have guessed it all started with an innocent attempt to play hooky? It's an ordinary Monday morning, and all over town, children are waking up and reluctantly dragging themselves out of bed for school. Some are oversleeping, hitting the snooze on their alarms, and getting a bit of extra shut-eye before their exhausted parents notice, wake them up, and rush to get them to school before the first morning bell. In one particular bedroom, a young boy is awake but still in bed, brainstorming as fast as he can. He is determined to skip school today however he can. He usually doesn't mind school very much, but today, all he can think about is the math test he didn't study for and the mean classmate who likes to knock his books out of his hands. But he can't just ask to skip school for no reason. He has to come up with a plan. He runs to the bathroom, splashing hot water in his face to give him a flushed appearance and a warm forehead. Then he hops back into bed and begins to loudly cough and sniffle until his mother comes to check on him. He complains that he doesn't feel well enough to go to school, and, sure enough, when his mother feels his forehead, it is hot to the touch. She agrees to let him stay home from school for the day, provided he stays in bed and gets plenty of rest. He promises that he will, and she leaves to go to work. On her way to work, the boy's mother remembers that there isn't much for him to eat while he's home alone all day. At least, there isn't much that he would want to eat while he's sick. She decides that she can be a little bit late to work for the sake of her son's health, and pulls into a nearby grocery store. She rushes out of her car and into the store, making a beeline for the soup aisle. She reaches for her usual go-to brand of chicken noodle soup, but finds the shelf completely bare. That's right, it's flu season. Of course, the soup is sold out. Oh great, this is exactly what she needs. A sick kid at home, 1 can of chicken noodle soup left at the store, and the machine won't even scan it. She smacks the side of the machine in frustration, and the screen reads invalid code, transaction canceled. With a heavy sigh, she glances over her shoulder. No one is watching. She tried to pay for the can to do the right thing, but the machine wouldn't let her. So she grabs the can and runs out of the store before anyone can spot her. While his mother is out, the boy is at home raiding the pantry for snacks to sate his not at all sick appetite. He fills up on Oreos and toaster pastries, cheesy crackers, and chips. When he hears his mother's car pulling into the driveway, he quickly wipes the crumbs from his face and jumps back into bed, just in time for his mother to find him there, resting like he promised he would. She gives him a kiss on the forehead and tells him that she'll heat up some chicken noodle soup for him to eat. She's in a hurry to make it to work, though, so she'll need to leave it in the microwave for him. She pours the contents of the soup into a bowl, adds a bit of water, and pops the bowl into the microwave for a few minutes. She calls up to her son, letting him know that the soup will be ready when the microwave dings. Then she rushes out the door and heads to work for the day, confident that her son will be fine through her shift. If he happens to need anything, he can call her and let her know. The boy hears the microwave ding, but his stomach is too full from his rummage through the pantry for him to want any of the soup, in spite of its heavenly aroma. Instead, he creeps into the living room and sits down to play video games until his eyes start to hurt. As he boots up his gaming system, he thinks for a moment that he can hear a strange noise coming from the kitchen, a soft, clucking sound, like the chickens he saw on his grandparents' farm. But he quickly forgets about the sound as the screen lights up, and he disappears into the world of his favorite game. He plays for hours, until the grumbling of his stomach interrupts his concentration. He's suddenly very hungry, and remembers the soup his mother left in the microwave. It is certainly cold and unappealing by now, but he can just reheat it first. He punches the buttons on the microwave and waits for the soup to be ready. Again, he can hear strange noises coming from the microwave, but he doesn't think anything of it. The microwave dings, and he pulls out the bowl of soup, grabs a spoon, and digs in. A little while later, the boy's mother pulls into the driveway in a panic. She left work early when her phone rang with a call from her son. She answered, asking what was wrong, but he wouldn't answer her. All she could hear on the other end was rustling, heavy breathing, and some pained grunting. Fearing the worst, she drove back as fast as she could, running several red lights along the way. Now she fumbles with her keys as she unlocks the door, terrified of what she will find. She grips her phone in her other hand, thumb hovering over the buttons, ready to dial 911 if the situation calls for it. She pushes the front door open, calling her son's name. He doesn't answer, and her stomach drops. Suddenly, she hears the loud thud of something heavy being knocked to the ground. Something is terribly wrong here, and even though she might find her worst nightmare, she has to face whatever is waiting for her inside. She runs into the kitchen and finds it a mess. The bowl of soup is shattered on the floor, congealed, cold soup pooling on the tile. The kitchen table is turned over on its side. The kitchen chairs are in disarray. But the strangest sight is the dozens of tiny, white, fluffy things on the floor, counters, and furniture. She picks one up for a closer look and finds herself even more confused than before. It's a feather. They're all feathers. She calls her son's name again, praying for a response. This time, she receives one, though not the one she hopes for. She hears the sound of shuffling footsteps up above, followed by a strangled sound like a scream caught in someone's throat. She sprints up the stairs as fast as her legs can carry her, throwing open the door to her son's bedroom. There, she finds him. But this is not the bright-eyed boy that she left behind when she left for work. His arms are covered with a thick layer of white feathers, the same feathers that are beginning to poke through the skin of his face. The top of his head has elongated into a floppy comb of excess skin, the same sort of excess skin that is wobbling below his chin. And his mouth, it doesn't look like a mouth anymore. It's pointed and hard, and his lips click together when he speaks, or rather, clucks. His bare feet are scaly and red, with claws protruding from his toes. He flaps his wings frantically, eyes wide and wild, clucking and running back and forth across the room. When he looks at her, she does not see recognition in his gaze. Her son, her beloved boy, has turned into a chicken. Unable to do anything else, the mother calls an ambulance. At first, the paramedics that arrive on the scene think the call was some sort of elaborate prank, but when they set eyes on the boy, they agree that something truly bizarre is going on. They speed to the hospital with the chicken boy in tow, but sadly are unable to save his life. The mother turns over the can of the mysterious soup to the authorities, who launch a formal investigation. Unfortunately, they are unable to trace the can to any store, nor are they able to verify the existence of the company name on its label. Employees of the grocery store where she found the can insist that they have never seen it in their lives. Several weeks after this incident occurred, the SCP Foundation conducted a raid on a New York office of Marshall, Carter, and Dark. For those of you unfamiliar with the organization, and that is most of the general population by design, Marshall, Carter, and Dark Ltd. is an extremely powerful multinational corporation founded by 3 individuals with those surnames, specializing in the acquisition and sale of anomalous items, entities, and experiences. To put it simply, they run the largest anomalous black market in the world and are the crime bosses of the paranormal world. During this particular raid, SCP Foundation operatives recovered 17 different unusual items. Among the items discovered was a shipping crate recently delivered by the Federal Postal Service from an invalid return address. This crate contained 103 cans of SCP-2057, as well as a copy of a letter written to one of the company's associates. So far, the letter has not been traced to an address. It reads, "Dear Cyrus, Maria has told me of the unfortunate circumstances that have befallen your children. I'd hoped to hear about the improvement of their condition soon. As their godfather, I am extremely distressed to hear this. Having experienced a child suffering from the measles myself, I know how terrifying it can be when it seems as if they are getting worse. Recently, we received a shipment of something that I hope can help your family. There is a crate in the storage area marked with Wondertainment, discontinued item. It will not be there long, as it goes to auction next week. I will leave a key under the photo of your family on your desk. Follow the instructions exactly. Do not, under any circumstances, do anything different than what is directed on the can. Destroy this message as soon as possible. I do not want any of this to come back on us. Be careful, my friend. Williams." SCP-2057 consists of 92 318-milliliter cans of condensed chicken noodle soup. Each can is covered with a brightly colored label depicting images of noodles, a cartoon chicken, and dancing vegetables. In addition to this inviting imagery, each label is emblazoned with the text, "Dr. Wondertainment's Ultralicious Chicken Noodle Soup for Kids." Each can has a pull-top lid for easy opening and is printed with a set of nutrition facts, ingredients, and instructions for heating. The nutrition facts are as follows: calories, 95, fat, 3.17 grams, carbohydrates, 2.2 grams, protein, 13.48 grams, vitamin W, 2 grams, and Mother's Love, 10 grams. The SCP Foundation attempted to analyze the contents of the soup in order to compare it to the posted nutrition facts. The calories, fat, carbohydrates, and protein were found to be accurately reported. Vitamin W was present in the reported amount as well, though it was not a compound that the Foundation scientists had ever encountered before. Mother's love, as it is an intangible concept, was not able to be identified or measured in the analyzed soup samples. The ingredients are listed as ultralicious chicken stock, enriched Chinese egg noodles, finest cooked chicken breast, farm-fresh carrots, crispy crunchy celery, sweet Vidalia onions, no paint thinner, fresh mountain spring water, vitamin W. Contains less than 2% of the following ingredients: a pinch of salt, a smidgen of chicken fat, sprinkle of spice extracted from rare plants, a dash of high-quality unicorn tears. The instructions for heating read, "Hey kids, feeling sick, icky, or downright yucky? Just pop open a can of Dr. Wondertainment's Ultralicious Chicken Noodle Soup for Kids. Place contents of the can in a medium-sized soup pot. Add a can of water, stir, and heat. Watch as the fun begins. Eat hearty, and you'll feel better and ready to play with Dr. Wondertainment toys in no time." All of this is relatively straightforward, give or take a few unusual ingredients. Someone taking only a quick look might mistake a can of this soup for any other chicken noodle soup. However, it does have something that most ordinary canned soup does not: a warning label. Dr. Wondertainment's Ultralicious Chicken Noodle Soup for Kids is intended to be eaten while it is hot to make you feel better in no time at all. Do not consume after it has become cold. Do not reheat. By purchasing from Dr. Wondertainment, you agree to not hold Dr. Wondertainment or any of Dr. Wondertainment's affiliates accountable for injuries or damages incurred by your product. Thank you for purchasing from Dr. Wondertainment. So what exactly is in a can of Dr. Wondertainment's Ultralicious Chicken Noodle Soup for Kids? Well, when the SCP Foundation first opened a can to take a look, they found that it was filled with condensed chicken broth and a mass of egg noodles shaped like an egg. When water was added and the contents of the can were heated to a temperature of 70 degrees Celsius, the noodle-based egg hatched. Inside was a small domesticated chicken made up of egg noodles, carrot, celery, onion, and cooked chicken breast. For simplicity's sake, this chicken noodle soup chicken is referred to as SCP-2057-1. As the Foundation researchers continued to heat the broth to a higher temperature, SCP-2057-1 began to move around, make audible chirping sounds, and eat the broth. As it ate, it grew larger and larger until it reached a mass of 85 grams and resembled a miniature adult chicken. At a temperature between 35 and 70 degrees Celsius, SCP-2057-1 behaved much like an ordinary chicken. It continued to behave normally even as it was consumed or cut apart, apparently feeling no pain or awareness of its situation. Dissection of SCP-2057-1 revealed that its insides were made up of soup ingredients, including celery and onion bones, cooked chicken breast muscles, carrot beak and legs, and chicken broth blood. When SCP-2057-1's temperature dropped below 35 degrees Celsius, it stopped moving and collapsed into the soup. At a temperature below 20 degrees Celsius, it became congealed and unappetizing. With these observations completed, the Foundation then attempted to measure the effects of this unusual chicken soup on a person that ingested it. When test subjects were fed samples of the soup at a temperature between 35 and 70 degrees Celsius, they had a very positive experience. The soup's taste was described as excellent, delicious, and homey. Though the meal caused a bit of psychological distress due to the soup chicken's realistic appearance and behavior, it improved every test subject's physical well-being. This eventually applied to test subjects with a case of influenza, measles, or the common cold. Following consumption of SCP-2057, each subject with a diagnosed illness of this kind reported immediate relief from their symptoms, including fever, aches and pains, cough, and congestion. With this positive, if a bit disturbing, effect documented, the Foundation next set out to determine what would happen if they let the soup get cold before it was eaten. Test subjects served this version of the soup had a far worse experience, describing the taste of their meal as bland, disgusting, and repulsive. 67% of the test subjects experienced cramps, chills, and diarrhea following their consumption of the soup, and 62% found themselves making involuntary clucking noises, as well as experiencing a strong aversion to poultry products. Again, several test subjects were deliberately selected based on their cases of influenza, measles, and the common cold. These test subjects immediately began to develop troubling symptoms, including the growth of pin feathers on their forearms, loosened excess skin on their heads and under their chins, a change in their ability to walk normally, and distressing hallucinations of being hung upside down by the ankles. Following these 2 rounds of testing, the research team decided to see why exactly the warning label advised against reheating the soup. D-Class 45782 was selected as the test subject for this particular experiment, and was instructed to reheat a bowl of cooled SCP-2057-1 in a microwave on high for 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Then, he was to consume the reheated soup and report his experience to a camera placed in the room with him. As instructed, D45782 microwaved the bowl of soup. As it heated in the microwave, it emitted unintelligible vocalizations in a deep voice. After removing the bowl from the microwave, D45782 noted that it was gelatinous-looking, with blackened burnt bits around the edges. He took 3 bites of the disgusting, hot and cold at the same time mixture before spitting it out onto the floor and refusing to eat another bite. 15 minutes after tasting the reheated soup, D45872 began to exhibit significant distress, clucking angrily into the camera. 5 minutes later, D45872 became more difficult to understand, clucks and other chicken-like vocalizations making up most of his attempted speech. He began scratching vigorously at his arms to the point of drawing blood. Loose skin could be seen gathering on the top of his head and under his neck. 6 minutes later, D45872 had lost the ability to speak. Large white pin feathers had sprouted from his arms, covering the skin, and smaller white feathers were beginning to sprout from his face. After 16 more minutes passed, D45872 began attacking other objects in the room, attempting to destroy the microwave, knocking the bowl of soup to the floor, and flipping over a table and chair. He had grown feathers over 67% of his skin, and his face had begun to change drastically. His nasal area was elongated and hardened, joining with his lower jaw in an appendage resembling a bird's beak. His upper lip had disappeared into his nasal cavity. Only 5 minutes later, D45872 suddenly stopped moving and collapsed to the floor, dead. Following D45872's death, an autopsy was performed. These were the findings. Autopsy revealed D45782's cause of death was due to extreme and sudden physical change of internal organs, resulting in shock and cardiac arrest. 93% of the subject's skin was covered in feathers. Physical changes in the face resulted in a beak-like alteration of the nose and mouth. Loose skin under the neck and on the top of the head resemble a wattle and comb. Subject's lower legs were found to be covered in thick, scaly skin, with the toes of the subject's feet ending in small, rounded claws. The subject and instance of SCP-2057-1 were incinerated after testing and autopsy. Whenever not being used for approved experimentation, all cans of SCP-2057 must be stored in a standard, large-volume storage locker in Containment Area 27 and kept at a temperature of 25 degrees Celsius. Because SCP-2057 is in limited supply, all experiments must first be approved by at least 2 personnel with 2-1103 clearance, as well as receiving the go-ahead from Dr. Applegate. There are still 41 cans of Dr. Wondertainment's chicken soup unaccounted for, and the Foundation has been unable to track them down so far. Who knows where they ended up? Maybe at another office of Marshall, Carter, and Dark. Or maybe, just maybe, one made its way onto the shelves at your local grocery store. Best to be careful out there. When you're feeling sick, hungry, or in need of a little pick-me-up, there's nothing quite like a steaming hot bowl of chicken noodle soup. Just make sure to read the label carefully and always follow the printed instructions. If you ignore them, you might just find that your chickens have come home to roost. After all, as the saying goes, you are what you eat. The old house has been abandoned for going on 2 decades, and as with any place that's been left uninhabited for this long, rumors tend to spiral. Of course, there are the more mundane explanations for why the 2-story, 4-bedroom home on the end of a nice street lays in semi-ruin. Black mold, asbestos, rising house prices. But those weren't the stories that most people told. Everyone in the neighborhood knew what really happened. All those years ago, the family that lived there had been murdered, and their killer was never caught. The 3 young paranormal investigators, with EMF readers in their hands and GoPro cameras mounted on their hard hats, know all about this. They approached the house in the dead of night, mumbling commentary for the recordings.
If the old house really is as haunted as everyone says it is, then they could be in for something really good here. Their subscribers always loved brand new paranormal content. They use a crowbar to breach the front door and head inside. It's everything you can expect from a house that had been abandoned for 17 years. Dust, cobwebs, and graffiti abound, broken bottles scattered across the floor. Someone has scrawled, "Welcome to Hell," above the door in faded Sharpie. It all plays perfectly for the cameras. Paranormal content gold. All of them turn on their flashlights, generously provided to them by one of their sponsors, of course. But in this particular situation, they have no idea just how valuable their product really is. After all, there are some frightening things that hide in the dark. The leader of the trio begins ascending the stairs, narrating into his helmet cam, giving the more popular version of the house's legend. The perfect suburban family, torn apart, literally, by a killer hiding in their home. The family had all been brutally murdered by someone in their home, but the police never found any sign of unlawful entrance or exit. There were no clues to the killer's presence whatsoever, in fact. It was as if they were a ghost, a vapor. It was almost as though whoever killed the family had always been in that house, and even after the murders were committed, they never left the place either. As he tells the story, the lead investigator starts to feel a little nervous. Even though he himself doesn't really believe in the supernatural, he just plays up reactions for the views, he still can't help but wonder, should I really be here? Am I making a terrible mistake? Is there a chance that whatever did this all those years ago could still be in the house, waiting for me? But he pushes those thoughts from his mind. This gig is too valuable for him to wimp out now, and really, what are the chances that something actually dangerous would be lurking in the house? The other two investigators are still looking around downstairs, sticking together, their flashlight beams slicing through the darkness. Their boss always insists on going upstairs first. He demands the glory shot, after all. That leaves the rest of them searching the downstairs living room, dining room, and kitchen, where the best they can hope for is maybe a particularly haunted-looking dishwasher. It's why the younger of the two is so surprised when they suddenly feel something happening to their body that they've never experienced before. In an instant, their whole body convulses with an involuntary shudder. They feel the temperature drop, and the world gets just that little bit darker. The best way they can describe the feeling is impending doom. Like any moment now, something terrible is going to happen. But almost as soon as the feeling begins, it's gone. Intensity dropping, the dread starting to dissipate, as though whoever or whatever caused this feeling literally passed right through them. Their fellow investigator asks them if they're okay. Of course, they nod and force a smile. They're fine. It's just a spooky place, is all. Atmosphere like this would get to anyone. Meanwhile, the lead investigator is exactly where he wants to be, ascending a rickety stepladder up into the attic, the very same attic where, all those years ago, the police had found what was left of the family. And from everything he'd read on the subject, their remains weren't a pretty sight, even by true crime enthusiast standards. He enters the attic and shines his flashlight around, capturing all the dusty old boxes left to rot in the cold. He's engrossed in the macabre spectacle of what had once been the worst and final moments of a group of strangers' very real lives. The attic is full of spider webs and shadows. They're so ubiquitous that as the lead investigator pauses to tell his camera the next chapter of the grisly tale, he doesn't even notice one of the shadows peeling off of the wall behind him. It wafts silently towards him like a gust of midnight air. Little by little, the blob of shadow starts to take on a vaguely human shape. It leans forward in the investigator's direction, arms extended like a classic movie monster. Long, dark claws slide out of its shadowy hands. Downstairs, the other two investigators hear the most terrible scream. For a moment, the more fantastical thought crosses their minds. Could this be one of the tormented souls of the departed family, longing to be heard after years of silence? Then it occurs to them that they recognize the scream. It belongs to their boss. The two of them charge up the stairs, flashlights in hand, as the screaming starts to become more desperate and pained, like that of a wounded animal with its leg caught in a trap. Those terrible wails are echoing down from the open hatch leading into the attic. It's so dark up there, something must have broken his flashlight. That's when they notice something else. Red, dripping from the open hatch. For a moment, they hesitate, wondering what could be going on up there. Could they really help, or would they just be running into the danger themselves? But soon, their desire to save their boss's life overpowers their fear. They grab the ladder and start climbing, feeling the dripping blood on the worn wooden rungs. When they finally get up into the attic, it feels like the scream is coming from everywhere, bouncing off the walls in a terrible, echoing cacophony of pain. They turn in all directions, hovering their flashlight beams around the room in wide, sweeping arcs, until both fall on the source of all this terror. And when they see it, they can't help but scream too. The lead investigator's body is floating about a foot off the ground, his screams now fading into pained gurgles. Something huge and dark is lifting him up with one hand and sinking the long, dark claws of its other into his neck. The second the twin flashlight beams concentrate on the creature, it drops the lead investigator's bleeding body down onto the ground. His skin slate gray, his feeble twitching slowing to a halt as the last of his life drains from him. Two glowing red pinpricks open up in the face of the dark figure, eyes like terrible, burning coals etching themselves into their memory. Like smoke, it continues to glide backwards further, seeking refuge in the dark, a safe haven amongst the other shadows. By this point, the two surviving investigators know there's nothing they can do for their boss anymore. All that's left is to get out and survive. They have to save themselves. They turn, wasting no time running towards the exit. They don't notice it, but the second they turn the beams of their flashlights away, the shadow's terrible eyes disappear, and it starts advancing towards them again, its claws outstretched and grasping for them with awful fury. The shadow creature grabs at their heads as they make their final leap for the exit. However, all the monster can pull away are their helmets and helmet cams as they scramble down the ladder and then down the stairs, running at speeds they didn't even think possible as the shadow slithers down behind them. It doesn't give up. It wants their lives. It wants their warm human blood on its claws. They clear the threshold of the accursed house and keep running to their car. One looks over their shoulder and sees the shadow leave the house, gaining on them, both claws outstretched and ready to rend their flesh. The two climb into their car. They see the shadow coming towards their window. It's moving so quickly, only a few feet away now. It's getting closer and closer and closer. Ignition. The car starts up and the driver smashes the pedal down. They take off, quickly accelerating up to illegal speeds as the shadow continues to chase, slowly getting smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror. A distant nightmare. A terrible, dark ghost. As it finally disappears, they feel a moment of safety. But really, only a moment. Because it occurs to them then that they cannot say with any confidence that this monster won't just be waiting for them when they get home. SCP-280, also known as Eyes in the Dark, is one of the more frightening and dangerous anomalies contained by the SCP Foundation. Of course, it likely won't be causing an XK-class end-of-the-world scenario anytime soon, but if you happen to run into this nocturnal monster, it's likely to cause an end-of-you scenario and remove you from the world with extreme prejudice. There's no way of telling just how many lives it claimed before the SCP Foundation finally got it into containment, and perhaps it's best to just not think about that. SCP-280 is a black wraith-like apparition that floats at roughly average human height, with no visible legs or feet, as the lower portion of its body simply fades away before it reaches the ground. In its dormant state, the entity may appear to be little more than a shadow, easily dismissed, especially in dark environments. This comes as a natural result of the being's frightening ability to become intangible at will, and only become physical when it enters a state of active aggression toward a human target. In this intangible state, victims have even been known to walk through the shadowy mass by accident. While this doesn't lead to any detrimental physical effects, victims report that being inside the creature can lead to heightened states of anxiety, fear, and dread. Despite its body being wholly composed of an unidentifiable black matter, when exposed to light, the creature does begin to express a pair of glowing dots on its head similar to eyes, hence its frightening nickname. However, all tests indicate that these eyes aren't actually functional. Instead, they appear to be a kind of defensive measure, like false eyes on the carapace of an insect. These eyes are never shown when SCP-280 is advancing towards a victim, only when it is in retreat, though this is only one of the entity's several defensive responses. If an area where the creature is residing becomes fully illuminated, or a sudden flash of extremely bright light is directed against it, then it will immediately dematerialize and appear in a different area. The one positive thing that can be said about the hunting patterns of SCP-280 is that they're relatively predictable. The entity, it seems, only has an interest in human beings. When it selects a target, it will pursue them relentlessly, approaching in its intangible form with its arms extended in what many describe as a sleepwalker pose. In this state, you may finally notice 280's claws, long, thin, and razor sharp. It may silently approach while the victim is turned the other way, or while they sleep soundly in bed, or even when they're paralyzed in fear at the very sight of it. When SCP-280 closes the distance, it will begin to rip and tear at its victims with its claws, causing massive physical trauma and, in some cases, death. Attacks range from 1 to 5 minutes of being relentlessly clawed at by the beast. When the attack is over, it will simply expose its eyes, become intangible once more, and escape. You will not be able to overpower the creature. Foundation tests have shown that it has extreme physical strength, and it's capable of tearing apart solid steel with little effort. If it can't find any humans to victimize, then it will simply remain dormant, pressing itself up against a wall, in a dark corner, or within some other structure. Which is why, if ever you feel nervous about a certain dark corner in a room near you, it is best to remove yourself from the situation as quickly as possible and remain in a brightly lit area. It would perhaps be comforting to believe that SCP-280 is acting on some twisted form of animal instinct. After all, while the results may seem horrific to us, every organism has to eat, right? Well, sadly, that isn't the case here. SCP-280 does not appear to eat, sleep, or breathe to survive, and it never consumes any of the matter torn from its victims. The best working theory is that the entity simply enjoys the harm it causes, taking a degree of perverse pleasure in hunting down and murdering its targets. There is no better nature to appeal to here. The SCP Foundation's ability to study the creature's biology has also been stunted, in part due to the creature's highly aggressive nature, and also the fact that its selective intangibility makes gaining physical samples almost impossible. Even capturing and containing the creature in the first place came partially out of blind luck. It first came to Foundation attention after a series of mysterious locked-door murders in a small Mississippi township. In the most recent case, an entire family had been brutally murdered in their home, leaving only one survivor. A traumatized 9-year-old boy named David, who'd locked himself in the basement when he started to hear the screaming. He was so terrified by the things he saw that night that he remained in a catatonic state for weeks afterwards, completely unresponsive to outside stimulus. But one little detail saved his life. A flashlight was clasped in his white-knuckle grip, shining a bright beam of cold, white light onwards. When David was removed and placed into medical care, officers began searching the building for any kind of clues as to how the other 4 family members were murdered. However, during this investigation, the police were just as vulnerable as the victims who'd been so recently slain. While one officer was wandering around the attic, looking for any evidence they may have missed, SCP-280 emerged from the darkness and attacked, tearing into his body with its long, deadly claws. Luckily for the officer in question, he survived the incident, though he was badly wounded. His report on the matter, including the ardent claim that he was attacked by a being, quote, made from black smoke, caught the attention of SCP Foundation operatives embedded in the precinct. They soon took over the investigation and descended on the house, hoping to tag and bag whatever had been behind all these deaths. This would be easier said than done. While Foundation field agents canvassed the home, they simply walked past the creature multiple times, discounting it as a mere shadow. After all, it only had these easily identifiable glowing eyes when it was in a retreating position. Even when it entered its physical state, operatives brushing up against it generally dismissed the sensation as hair, clothing, or some other object touching them in the dark. This already bungled investigation got even worse when the Foundation decided to introduce high-intensity lights into the equation, hopefully flushing the creature out. This, of course, only caused it to dematerialize and appear elsewhere. The chase ended in an almost farcical fashion, a cavalcade of Foundation agents chasing a cloud of sneering black smoke across a Mississippi field at 2:30 a.m. Thankfully for the human race, the entity was, at the very least, eventually secured and contained. However, this wouldn't be the last time it was out of containment. During a series of tests with different types of illumination, intending to test SCP-280's reflexes, it disappeared from its chamber. It seemed almost to sink through the different levels of the illuminated site before coming to rest at the containment chamber holding SCP-1591. This made for a fascinating accidental cross-test. You see, SCP-1591, to put it simply, is a unique sculpture of a star that emits an incredibly bright light, and this light will slowly make any being subject to its glow intangible before disappearing completely. When SCP-280 came before SCP-1591, it displayed its eyes, but did not retreat. In fact, it assumed a kneeling position and simply remained before the anomalous sculpture until it faded from existence. It then remanifested in its own containment chamber several hours later without incident. All things considered, It went pretty well, as far as containment breaches involving deadly, human-hating monsters go. Because of its ability to demanifest and phase through solid objects, SCP-280 is incredibly difficult to contain, earning it the dreaded Keter object class. In order to avoid the risk of demanifestation, SCP-280 is contained in a 5x5 meter cell that is perpetually left in a state of total darkness. No equipment is to be left in the cell unsupervised at any time, and any items brought into the cell for testing must be removed when the testing is complete. Any staff members entering the chamber for tests must be equipped with infrared goggles, an infrared ID strobe, and also a strong flashlight to ward the creature off in the case that it becomes aggressive. If SCP-280 does attempt to attack anyone in the chamber, all attending staff are instructed to turn on their flashlights and turn the beams against the creature. No aggressive action is permitted, and staff members must remain at least 1 meter away from SCP-280 at all times for their own safety. And if you suddenly feel yourself getting a little nervous in an eerily dark room, I'd like you to remember this. The one thing more frightening than seeing eyes in the dark is not seeing them. It's October 31st, 2021, and anyone who's anyone in the upper crust of society knows that there's really only one place to celebrate Halloween if you want to stay relevant: a certain Norwegian billionaire's yearly costume ball. Invitations are highly exclusive, and if you have to ask where you can get one, you're definitely not on the list. Those lucky, beautiful, famous, or just plain rich enough to be invited receive the notice a year in advance, in an increasingly elaborate fashion each time. Rumor has it that one year the billionaire specially trained a flock of purebred carrier pigeons to deliver the invites, printed on scrolls recovered from the ruins of the Library of Alexandria. But that's just a rumor, of course. This year's invitations arrived in the form of a luxury sports car with a simple, gold-embossed card hidden in the glove compartment that read, "Lucky You." It then provided information on this year's theme, medieval fantasy. The dress code would be strict, and failure to comply would result in being barred from entering the event. It also included a vital piece of carefully guarded information, the location of the party. The lavish event is held in the billionaire's castle, nestled in the remote countryside of Norway, which he had built a decade ago specifically for this one night a year. For the other 364 days, it sits vacant, except for a full staff to keep it in prime condition, of course. As a group of first-time partygoers pull up the long, winding driveway to the castle's gates, their limo is stopped by a guard. "Your driver will need to let you out here," he explains. "Can't have someone who isn't on the list coming up to the residence," your host insists. And so the group, 2 men and 2 women, climbs out of the car, and they all make their way up the drive on foot. They didn't prepare for the trek, and by the time they reach the castle gates, the ladies are sweating into their exquisite handmade gowns, and one of the gentlemen has torn a small hole in his tights. Nevertheless, they have arrived at what promises to be a truly grand occasion. Once the gates creak open and grant them admission, they quickly forget the discomfort of the long walk. Reports of the event have not, in fact, been greatly exaggerated. It is every inch as impressive as they could have imagined it would be. A lush golden carpet rolls out from the doors into the ballroom, and a herald clad in period attire blows a horn to signal their arrival. He announces their names to the room, where beautiful people are already dancing and frolicking to their heart's content. There are rows and rows of delicious-looking food, including roasted pigs, fresh fruit, and cakes. There are fountains filled with the finest champagne, and a full orchestra provides live music that fills the enormous halls. Above it all, the host himself sits, dressed in regal robes and a crown positively dripping with jewels. It is the most indulgent, decadent, glorious event any of them have ever been a part of. There are no clocks inside the party castle, and no other way to note the passage of time while inside. This is entirely deliberate, and an event there ends only when the guests have all grown too weary to continue the merriment. It is for this reason that the 4 newcomers do not notice how late it has grown, or the fact that one day has already bled into the next outside the castle. By the time they stumble back outside, filled with cake, champagne, and fresh gossip they can't wait to repeat, it is nearly dawn. They walk back down the path that led them to the castle, their steps a little heavier with exhaustion and the aforementioned champagne, and notice that there are rows of limousines and other cars waiting where they were dropped off. "Excuse me," one of the women calls out to a guard. "Where's our limo?" "Where did you tell him to wait?" the guard responds. At this, the woman looks at her companions, who all shrug. None of them were aware of this practice, and they sent the driver home when they left the car. "We didn't," she explains. The guard stares at her blankly for a moment, then bursts out laughing. Well then, he says, you'll just have to walk. Surely there's a contingency plan in place, right? Their wealthy host can't expect his guests to walk home if they didn't think to plan ahead and tell their driver to wait all night. The group waits for the punchline, the reveal that there is a driver on staff ready to give them a ride or someone who can call them a cab, but it never comes. Not only that, but none of their cell phones have a signal. They can't call the driver to come back, even if he wasn't likely to be dead asleep at this hour. The guard is right, they will have to walk, at least until they have enough of a signal to call for a taxi. So, with no other option in sight, the disillusioned partygoers begin the long journey back to civilization. Light is beginning to trickle back onto the landscape, allowing them to at least see where they are going, but it is still mostly dark as they make their way along the road. "Are we safe out here?" one of the men asks. "From what, muggers?" the other replies. "There could be bears out here," one of the women remarks. "No," the other woman insists. "The bears are all hibernating this time of year, aren't they?" They all collectively shiver at the thought of encountering a bear or anything else out on this lonely road, with nowhere to hide and no way to defend themselves. Best not to dwell too long on that thought, or they might find themselves paralyzed with fear. They still have who knows how many steps left to go before they can relax. They walk together in silence for a long time, listening for the sound of any dangerous criminals or bears creeping up behind them, but nothing comes. As they slowly progress, the sun begins to emerge on the horizon, flooding the landscape with warm light and chasing away the fear of the dark. "Look," one of the ladies finally breaks the silence. "Up there!" She points, directing her friend's attention to a hill up ahead. There, they can make out the silhouettes of men on horseback, wearing suits of medieval armor. They're dressed as knights, like something out of a King Arthur story. "They must have come from the party." The others nod, agreeing. "Maybe we could ask for a ride?" one of the men suggests. "Or to borrow a horse," the other chimes in. In agreement, the four approach the knights in shining armor, waving their arms as they go. "Halt! Who goes there?" shouts one of the knights. "Oh, there's no need for that," the other woman laughs. "We came from the same place." "Art thou friend or foe?" the knight asks. He does not remove his helmet. His hand rests on the hilt of his sword. Thinking it all must be some kind of joke, the group of partiers continues up the hill. Spurred to action, the knight draws his sword, brandishing it threateningly. This is enough to stop the group in their tracks. "Is he serious?" mutters one woman to the other. "I can't tell," she replies. "That sword looks pretty real, though." Behind them, they hear the clip-clop of hooves and turn to see two other knights sitting atop massive black horses, brandishing weapons. "I think we should go," she yells to her friends, gathering her skirts and running back down the hill, but the rest of the group don't seem so willing to turn back. "You want to play a game? Then let's play," says one of the men as he draws his own sword, a perfect replica of one wielded by a character in his favorite fantasy television series, and tries to wave it back at the knight, but he promptly drops it on the grass. It's much heavier than he thought it would be. "Leave this place now, or face your death," a voice bellows from above him. "Now wait just a minute, who do you think you're talking to?" the man says as he bends down to pick his sword up again. But before he can finish, there's a flash of glimmering steel in the sunlight, followed by a spray of dark red liquid that hits the rest of the partygoers. They watch in silent horror as the man's head rolls off his shoulders before looking back at the man on horseback. This isn't a game at all. The blood-stained partygoers turn and run from these frightening strangers on horseback, but they can hear the thunderous hooves following them, the clank of the metal armor. The woman who first began to run looks back over her shoulder and can't believe what she sees. It's a rout as the mounted knights chase their fleeing foes, cutting them down in their retreat. All she can do is run and hope that they're too distracted with their current quarry to come after her. She doesn't know how long she runs before the sound of the massacre starts to fade out, but eventually, it does. Unable to run any longer, she collapses in the grass, frightened and confused by all that has happened. But with a scream, she jumps to her feet once again as she hears footsteps behind her. "You can't sleep here," says a man with a harsh barking voice. "This is a restricted area." Before her stands the second group of armed men she's seen that day. This time, they're dressed in modern military attire. The Norwegian army? She can't be sure. The man doesn't have an accent. She starts to plead with the man, but he abruptly cuts her off. "What year is it?" he asks, his expression serious. She answers, confused, giving him the current year. He relaxes. "This area is closed to the public. It's not safe for you to be here. Let me escort you out of the perimeter," he offers. She tries to tell him what she's seen, the strange men on horseback, her friends being slaughtered before her eyes. When the man asks how she got there, she lets the whole story come pouring out, the billionaire, the invitation, the party. In her frantic state, she doesn't notice one of the guards, who radios to someone that it looks like he's done it again. The man questioning her changes his tone. He doesn't seem at all concerned about a murderous group of medieval knights in the woods. "Sounds like you had a bit too much to drink," he tells her before putting a comforting arm around her shoulders. And she doesn't even notice the syringe until she feels a prick on her upper arm before losing consciousness. The woman would be returned home and have no memories of the events that she witnessed. She'd never remember how much danger she was in when she had a brush with SCP-526. SCP-526, also known as the Valhalla Gate, is located on a hill in Norway. The SCP Foundation has hidden information on the gate's exact whereabouts, no doubt to stop curious civilians from wandering into danger or filming short viral videos. But if you find yourself in the Norwegian countryside, it can still easily be identified. Simply look for a ring of 9 stones, each standing at about 2 meters tall, placed in a 10-meter radius at the top of the hill. If you're not certain whether you're in the right place, or if you just happened upon another mysterious stone circle, look for the runes inscribed on the inward surface of each one. If the runes are there, you're in the right place. Or the wrong place, depending on who you ask. Every day at sunrise, give or take about 15 minutes, the gate will open and release a group of warriors from any point in history, fully armed and outfitted for battle. These can range from a small group of archers to 300 Spartans to groups of highly trained special operatives, and every member of the temporarily displaced group will be from the same period in history. As if they all ran through some sort of rift at the same time. Though these resulting manifestations rarely harm anyone, staying in place 92% of the time after they first appear on the hilltop, the remaining 8% lead to scenarios which can truly be a bloodbath. After all, to an army lost in the fog of war, emerging in a strange land in an unfamiliar time, anyone can look like an enemy. No matter how they behave on their initial appearance, those who cross through SCP-526 will attempt to attack anyone who approaches the anomaly. They will remain in the area until sunset, at which time they disappear, presumably returning back to wherever and whenever they originated. The SCP Foundation first discovered SCP-526 after a group of backpackers were hospitalized in the area. They claimed to have been walking through the hills when suddenly they were swarmed by, quote, a bunch of Vikings with axes. Naturally, this drew the attention of Foundation field agents, who soon found the mystical stone circle responsible for the attack. The survivors were given amnestics, and a cover story circulated blaming the claims of Vikings on recreational hallucinogens. Since this first incident, notable encounters between the Foundation and the soldiers traveling through the temporal gate have been few and far between, but there have been a few that were designated significant enough to be recorded in the official archives. 4, to be exact. In the 1990s, a member of the Foundation containment team spotted 40 figures making their way down the hill in the dim dawn light. They were holding longbows and swords, weapons at the ready as they made their descent. One member of the team, who it should be noted was on his very first day of containment duty, made the mistake of calling out to the strangers. "Gentlemen, please lower your weapons," he called. His request, however polite it may have been, was answered with an arrow to the shoulder. Thankfully, the rest of the team was able to swoop in and settle things before the situation could progress any further. The injured personnel was given prompt medical attention and reassigned to a desk job where he was much less likely to encounter flying projectiles of any kind. A few years later, the team of Foundation operatives placed at SCP-526 had started to grow complacent. There had not been a violent incident in ages, just a series of very confused people appearing at sunrise and milling around until they vanished at sunset. It seemed that most of the subjects passing through the temporal rift were not as bloodthirsty as one might expect. Then, one operative was startled out of a daydream by the thunk of a stone axe hitting a tree near his head. He and the rest of his team looked up to see a group of 30 men clad in animal skins pouring down the hillside, rushing right for them. In their fists, they held crude weapons carved from stone, their wild eyes, untamed beards, and blood-stained clothing becoming clearer as they grew closer. Fortunately for the SCP Foundation, these cavemen had brought clubs to a semi-automatic rifle fight. They opened fire, and within minutes, not a single hide-clad man was left standing. It was a bit awkward, looking at their fallen bodies for the rest of the day, but the team saw no point in moving them if they were just going to disappear that night anyway. One task force member spent the rest of the day looking at his hands, paranoid he may have shot one of his ancient ancestors and erased himself from the timeline in a back-to-the-future-like fashion. This was, thankfully, not the case. Several more years passed, and the century turned to usher in the new millennia. In the early 2000s, a platoon of 20 Russian soldiers, later identified when a Foundation officer attempted to translate several curses yelled at him by one of the men, materialized, wearing World War II uniforms and carrying rifles consistent with that time period. Most of them did not move from the hill, staying in a defensive position, but a few got a bit too bold and opened fire on the Foundation operatives. The fire was returned in kind, and 2 men were killed, but the rest were left unharmed for the remainder of the day. The final incident on record is particularly notable because, in this case, the soldiers that appeared did not belong to a particular country's military, nor were they from the distant past. There were 30 men and women, dressed in an uncomfortably recognizable uniform. These were the members of a lost SCP Foundation mobile task force, all killed in action during a field mission several years prior. Wanting to avoid friendly fire, the operatives placed at the site attempted to speak to these MTF members, but they did not respond. Instead, they attacked and would not relent until air support arrived in the form of a Foundation AC-130 gunship, Thor's Hammer, leaving 3 dead and 11 wounded when the smoke finally cleared. This last encounter raised some difficult questions about the nature of SCP-526 and the mental state of those who passed through it. They seemed unable to recognize their own peers, unable to hear what they were saying. Their instinct to defend SCP-526 from any perceived invaders overrode whatever familiarity or loyalty they might ordinarily have for other Foundation operatives. It was a tragic, disquieting affair with no clear answers in sight. The SCP Foundation is, of course, no stranger to terminating its own, but the individual officers present for this incident reported a high rate of post-traumatic stress disorder, and several requested to be given amnestics in order to put a stop to recurring nightmares. The Foundation will not be able to learn more unless more of their own fallen soldiers pass through the gate. Even if they do, it is impossible to say whether they will be able to ask any questions or engage in a dialogue, or whether they will have to gun them down in another round of kill or be killed. Because there is no way to know what each new sunrise at SCP-526 will bring, the SCP Foundation has classified the anomaly as Euclid. As there is no way to move SCP-526 to any official Foundation site, the 15-kilometer radius around the anomaly has been converted into Armed Containment Area 31. The cover story for this area is a military weapon testing site, and there is a no-fly zone in effect there. A team of qualified field agents is placed on site in order to observe and neutralize any subjects that emerge from SCP-526. Because all is fair in war and, well, war, the agents placed there are permitted to use deadly force if their lives are threatened or the containment is jeopardized. 30 minutes before the sun comes up, the containment teams are placed on full alert and will keep their eyes on SCP-526 until the sun has set and all potential threats have disappeared. If a given day's apparitions are too aggressive or too numerous for the teams on the ground to contain, Mobile Task Force Sigma-9, or Valkyries, may assist via airstrike. Since the Foundation has set up its perimeter around SCP-526, no civilians have been harmed, though the same can't be said for Foundation personnel or the revolving door of strange warriors emerging on the hill. The protocol has been considered successful. I haven't yet been out to see the gate in person myself. I tend to be more of a pacifist, but if I ever do, I'll make sure to bring a shield, a bulletproof vest, and perhaps a full suit of armor. Why not? The best offense is a good defense, I always say.
If he breathes, the bear will see him. Lying flat on his stomach, the boy has no choice but to watch as the hulking brute eats his father before his very eyes. Lying in the thicket just a few trees away, the boy knows that any small movement he makes could prove fatal. A bear this large, hunting for its hibernation, will have no issue chasing him down in a split second and doing exactly what it did to his father, to him. The boy is utterly powerless. All he can do is stay deathly still and watch. They'd found the tracks too late. On the way back to camp, they'd been following the wooded cliff that lines the ocean's edge. Bows and salmon slung over their shoulders, they'd been so proud of their catch and the prospect of bringing it back to the tribe that they hadn't kept their wits about them. By the time they'd seen the enormous prints in the dirt, the sound of lumbering footsteps were already echoing through the trees behind them. The boy's bow is too far out of reach. He dropped it when his father pushed him into the thicket. He's got the knife hanging at his side, but he doubts it's long enough to even get through the bear's fatty hide. In contrast, the only thing protecting him from its bite is the leather hide slung across his shoulders and a woven garment from the tribe's elders. One slash of the bear's claw, and he'd be. A breeze ruffles his hair. The boy's eyes widen in horror. That wind hadn't come from in front of him, but from behind, blowing his scent, his fear, directly towards the bear's nostrils. The boy plants his muddy palms into the dirt,
staring at the animal. Its nostril twitches, then twitches again. It half turns its head, sniffing the air. Maybe it won't bother with him. The bear's turning back to its meal already. The boy lets out a sigh of relief, and a twig snaps. The bear snarls and whips its head around. For a second, the two of them lock eyes, predator and prey. Then the boy takes off running. Fast as he can, he leaps through the undergrowth, ferns and nettles whipping at his shins. He fumbles the knife out of its sheath and slings the water skin off his shoulder, throwing it wildly behind him. He doesn't know if he hit the bear. He doesn't have time to turn around and see. It's going to be on him in an instant. Up ahead, he sees sunlight streaming through the thick trees, the cliff edge. If he can just get to that, maybe he can climb down and... No, there's no time. Besides, bears are better climbers, better swimmers, better runners. All the boy can hope for is that he's a better jumper. Him and the boys from the tribe have leapt off plenty of cliffs along the shore, but never these ones. There are too many rocks, too many shallows. But the thundering of 4 enormous paws behind him is looming larger and larger. He can almost feel the bear's hot breath on the back of his neck. There's nothing for it. Here goes. The trees clear, the sun blasts his skin, a claw slashes at his back, and the boy launches himself into the air. The wind carries him. The weightlessness of wheeling his arms and legs through the empty sky is almost enough to make him laugh with joy, until the boy looks down. The cliff is higher, much, much higher than he'd realized. His momentum carries his torso forwards into a tumble. He's not going to land straight, and he can see jagged rocks everywhere beneath him. The boy closes his eyes and crashes into the sea. All of the air is slammed out of his lungs. His knee hits something hard and sharp in the water. A swell throws him away from the shore and pulls him deep. Without air in his chest, he can't float. Kicking hard as he can, the boy swims upwards, eyes still screwed shut. His face bashes into a sandy rock. No, that's not upwards. Which way is it? Which way should he swim? The ocean current rolls him over and over. Darkness fills his mind. But his feet find a hard surface, and he pushes against it, launching himself through the water, kicking as hard as he can. The darkness fades. Light. The boy's head breaches the water, and he splutters for air, rubbing the water out of his eyes. He looks around wildly. The sea has carried him away from the cliff and out into open water. It's lifting and dropping him with each wave, carrying him this way and that, like a flower in the wind. And there, traversing the cliff face, scrambling down the rocks, is the bear. The boy's stomach turns. It reaches the bottom of the cliff and sees him there in the water. Tipping back its head, it roars at an almighty volume, deafening the boy over the sound of the waters. Even from this distance, the animal looks impossibly large. It dwarfs the boulders that line the water's edge. It slips into the water, barely making a ripple, and kicks off from the shore. Going straight for him, the bear is covering the distance so fast, he only has seconds left. With barely the strength to keep himself afloat, the boy knows he'll never be able to outswim this creature. Instead, he takes a deep breath and looks up at the woods, remembering all of the happy moments he'd spent in there with his father. A current swells beneath the boy and almost throws him out of the water. An enormous shadow flies through the depth beneath him. A whale? It couldn't be. Whatever it is, the shadow is swimming straight at the advancing bear. So fixated on its prey, the bear doesn't even notice what's approaching until it's too late. The ocean explodes. A blast of water as tall as the cliffs themselves shoots up into the air and showers the boy's head. Somewhere in the midst of the spray, a monster erupts from the depths. Snapping its jaw around the bear, it lifts the animal into the air and throws it against the cliff. The impact is so strong that a small landslide follows the bear's rolling body as it tumbles back towards the water. But the boy has eyes only for the monster emerging from the sea. Crawling up the rocks with one gnarled foot after another, the boy can hardly make sense of what he's looking at. It seems to have some kind of scaly hide, harder than the rocks surrounding it. A wave crashes against the monster as it leers over the bear and sinks its teeth into the animal's hide. Unable to look away, the boy kicks out and starts swimming away up the coast. Only once he's a long way around the bay does he dare to clamber out and back onto land. That night, once the rest of the tribe have gone to sleep, the boy can't help but lie wide awake in his tent. Without his father here, it's not the same. Quietly rolling up the hide doorway, the boy slips out into the night. They're camped by a small cave with beautiful smooth walls inside. They say it's the cave of their ancestors, the place where all life started. The fire in the cave has to always burn. Fortunately for him, the cave is empty. The boy stares up at the wall in wonder. Finger drawings of animals, hunters, mothers, shamans, gods, and forests fill almost every part of it. Only one space remains in the corner, a finger painting of the rocky cliffs with the swelling sea beneath. Dipping his finger into the paint, the boy sits by the wall and starts to paint. A terrible monster crawling out of the sea, with a scaly hide stronger than any rock. That's it. You know that from just some finger painting. The archaeologist turns to the group of researchers surrounding him in the cave. UV lights are set up all along the walls, with the blue and violet shapes revealed all across the stonework. The archaeologist can't help but empathize with the spiritualism of their long-forgotten ancestors who'd lived in these caves thousands of years ago. The professor was the one who asked the question, a cold woman standing well over 6 feet tall with a crop of fiery ginger hair. To him, she seems less of a scientist and more of a military leader. But what does he know? "Walk with me," she says and leads him out of the cave. Personnel fills the surrounding area. Most of them are armed. Cranes lift huge sheets of reinforced lead plating into place. Several mysterious vats line the edge of the forest, each adorned with more warning and hazard signs than you'd see in a nuclear power station. The two of them have to pause for a moment as 3 tanks roll past them. The archaeologist breaks the silence. "You know the reason I started all my research in the first place? Did I ever tell you that story? Every early civilization in the world, whether it's ancient China, Mesopotamia, South America, Northern Europe, all these cultures, you take a look at their mythology and what do you find?" The professor ignores him, instead choosing to bark orders at a group of agents talking over coffee. They all immediately dump their drinks and get back to work. What one thing do they all talk about, even though it never existed? Dragons. All these disparate people with no contact with one another, all of them still draw pictures of dragons. The professor stops walking at the edge of the cliff. The pair of them stand there, surveying the vast ocean stretching out in front of them, as researchers, agents, and workers rush around behind them. After a long pause, the professor asks him to proceed. In ancient Hebrew texts, when they talk about God creating the world in 7 days, what happens on day 5? The professor flicks the hair out of her eyes and replies curtly, "God created fish in the sea and birds in the sky." Well, not exactly. Look at the original Hebrew. He created all of the fish that teem in the sea, sure, but he also created Leviathan, a serpent-like monster from the depths, as old as the world itself. You think that's what we're dealing with? Maybe. Or something worse. By nightfall, preparations are operational. Enormous floodlights switch on, one after another, illuminating an enormous steel box with an open lid at the top, surrounded by armed agents, huge net launchers, and several tanks. It all seems a bit excessive as far as the archaeologist is concerned. He isn't officially still supposed to be here, but in all of the scramble for the Foundation to get the capture site ready, no one noticed that he had stuck around. From the viewing platform several hundred meters away, he has to watch it all unfold through a pair of binoculars. Out above the water, suspended from one of the cranes, is an elephant carcass. The professor told him that the Foundation had even marinated it for extra flavor. He had only been recruited into this project a couple of months ago, but from what he could tell, it's been an ongoing priority for the Foundation for several years now. The scale of the operation of just setting up at this site is already mind-boggling, but they've been chasing up leads like this for years now. Arriving at scenes, they suspect this creature has been sighted in the past and setting up traps for it. He was only brought in out of desperation. The Foundation had exhausted all recent hunting grounds and was trying to cast the net even wider. He'd just been quietly working on his university research paper about ancient reptile drawings when the agents had let themselves into his office. But staring through his binoculars now, the archaeologist knows there's no chance of this operation actually working. They have floodlights, for crying out loud. No intelligent predator would come anywhere near that elephant carcass. Movement. Not in the waters or any of the lit-up areas. No, there's something in the forest line, just behind a group of researchers. He reaches instinctively for his walkie-talkie, then stops himself. How many times had he got jittery before and reported something preemptively? The agents already don't take him seriously as it is. He can't be jumping at shadows. But there it is again, a shape moving fast through the trees. He scans the binoculars this way and that, trying to find it. Just a group of researchers there, some agents there, supply crates, researchers, agents. Wait, weren't there more of them a second ago? He looks closer. Someone's gone missing. He clicks on the radio. South Lookout Team, report in. Nothing. South Lookout Team? A sickening feeling settles in his stomach. With all those bright lights everywhere, they're casting a lot of dark shadows. He has to do something fast. Running down from the lookout point, the archaeologist takes off running through the trees to the site. He holds his radio up to his mouth as he goes, trying to get anyone to respond, but it's hopeless. The thicket cracks and crunches under his feet as he tries to make his way through the dark woods, ignoring the feeling that crawls up his neck of being watched. A boulder blocks his way. The archaeologist grabs onto it with both hands and hauls himself on top of it, stopping for a moment to catch his breath. From up here, he can see the floodlit capture site. The tanks and cranes still sit rumbling, ready to go at a moment's notice, but he can't see any ground crew anymore. He switches the radio to the open channel and calls out for anyone to respond. The professor's voice crackles back at him.
What are you still doing here? This is a highly dangerous operation that you don't have clearance for.
He yells at her to cancel it. They need to evacuate the site immediately. It's compromised. She laughs derisively and cuts off the channel. No, she has to believe him. People are dying, and more of them will if she doesn't. The archaeologist whispers to himself in the darkness. It's no monster. It's just an innocent creature. You're playing with a power you don't understand. It's strange. For a moment, he swears he almost hears a voice whispering something back to him in the woods. But when he looks around, he's all on his own. He has to keep moving. The creature could be anywhere. Hopping off the jagged boulder, the archaeologist takes off running through the forest once more, looking over his shoulder every few steps. The light must be playing tricks on him. In the darkness, he can't see the boulder he was standing on a moment ago anywhere. He bursts out of the tree line and into the clearing right next to the steel box. A ramp leads up to the top of it, with a large trap door suspended over the open lid. Well, if he wants to be seen and heard, that's where he needs to go. The archaeologist runs up the ramp and waves his hands wildly in the air. The tanks all turn their turrets to aim at him. The crane holding the enormous steel lid for the enclosure looms menacingly above his head. And there, marching out onto the field, looking absolutely furious, is the professor. Her red hair looks more like a ball of flames right now. We need to evacuate the site now! It's here! She snarls and marches up the ramp to meet him, jabbing a finger in the archaeologist's face. He suddenly realizes how much taller she is. You are not jeopardizing our one chance of catching this thing. Get out of the way, or I will have you detained. Besides, what evidence do you have? But the archaeologist isn't looking at her. Instead, his eyes stare in horror at the elephant carcass suspended behind her. There was a huge, reptilian bite mark taken out of it. A testing bite, like the ones given by sharks. She turns to follow his gaze, and all of her rage is washed away in a sickening delight. It's here. A scream from the crane holding the elephant makes them both jump, but by the time they look up at the cabin, all they see is a hulking shadow leaping away into the darkness. The professor clicks on her walkie-talkie and starts issuing commands. No one responds, except the tank crews. She tries again. Radio silence. Now the gravity of the situation really starts to hit her. Eyes wide with panic, she runs off down the ramp, barking into her radio and leaving the archaeologist up here on his own. Suddenly, under all of these lights, he feels very exposed. It could be anywhere in the shadows. Footsteps, heavy, planted footsteps tremor through the ground, and out of the woods walks the creature. Several meters long, fat from all of its hunting, the beast that would soon be known as SCP-682 slinks into view. It looks up at him, standing there in the trap door over a metal box, and looks like it's almost ready to laugh at how easy this will be. Boom! The tank blast hits the creature square in the torso, knocking it sideways. Boom! 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 The three tanks open fire one after the other, laying round after round into the colossal reptile, kicking more and more dust into the air. Before long, there's a crater in the ground so large that it looks almost like an asteroid hit it. Smoke and dust fill the air. The archaeologist's eyes fill with tears. That majestic creature, roaming the earth long before mankind ever did, exterminated just like that. Cowards. That's what people really are. Cowards. But as the dust clears, a groaning sound echoes around the clearing. The archaeologist shields his eyes and peers into the crater as best he can, but there's nothing there. Boom! He wheels around and almost falls backwards in shock. The SCP has snuck through the haze and leapt onto one of the tanks. It bites and tears at the armored bodywork, doing all it can to destroy it. In a panic, two of the tanks point toward one another and fire, destroying themselves in the process. The creature rounds on the remaining tank and bites down hard on the barrel. The tank fires, the round going straight down the monster's throat and exploding inside its gut. The backdraft from the blast shoots back through the tank, and a puff of smoke trails out of the hatch at the top. And suddenly, once again, the clearing is quiet. Turning back to the archaeologist, SCP-682 slinks towards him, smoke still curling up out of his leering teeth. With heavy, thunking steps, it climbs the ramp towards him, stopping just short of the trap door. The two of them stare each other in the eye, predator and prey. Neither move for a moment. Then it opens its mouth. The archaeologist closes his eyes.
Do you know that you disgusting creatures deserve this?
He opens them. Did the monster just speak?
What do they hope to accomplish by attacking me?
He gulps hard. That whisper he heard in the woods, the rock he'd been standing on. They're scientists. Scientists always try to learn more things, understand the world better. We think you can't be killed, so they're testing their hypothesis. The creature growls. The stench of rotten flesh fills the archaeologist's nose. It takes a step towards him, then another. The archaeologist runs. He'll leap off the other end of the platform. It's a big jump, but he could make it. The predator's breath is on the back of his neck. He jumps just as the trapdoor gives way. With an enormous thud, the SCP falls into the steel enclosure. Before it has a chance to move, the crane unhitches the steel lid, and it crashes down into place, sealing the monster inside. The archaeologist lands in the dirt and rolls onto his back to see the professor, wild-eyed and cheering, up in the crane's cabin. He lies there on his back, panting and staring up at the stars. A clunking sound echoes through the clearing, and the gurgle of a liquid flowing through pipes. He sits up, adrenaline still pumping through him. The professor has plugged a pipe into the metal enclosure and is running gallons and gallons of liquid into it. He follows the tube with his eyes, all the way to the enormous hazardous vats on the edge of the clearing. Hydrochloric acid. His eyes widen in horror. The professor laughs at him. Come on, cheer up. We're just scientists, that's what you said. Just testing a hypothesis.
The final bell rings, signaling the end of a new class's first day at middle school. A girl exits the building, her backpack slung over her shoulder, body hunched under its unfamiliar weight. It's been a long and tiring day. Her family just moved to this small Oklahoma town from the big city, and of course, she's spent every minute since then trying to adjust to her new surroundings. It's never easy to be the new kid in town. Right now, all she wants to do is to get home and relax. She doesn't want to think about school and its related anxieties for the rest of the night. As she walks down the stairs, she notices the school bus parked at the curb. Thank goodness, she thinks. I can't wait to get out of here. This day can't end soon enough. But for some reason, something about this bus sets her nerves on edge. What is it that just seems off? There's nothing blatantly wrong with the bus, but when she looks closer, she realizes that it definitely looks a little strange. The different parts of the bus just don't add up. Some parts are new, clearly just off the factory floor, while others are battered and bruised from long-time wear. Some parts even seem to come from different makes and models of bus. I guess it's not that strange, she thinks. After all, her old school always had a measly budget. You could practically see the road through holes in the floor sometimes. Her new one probably just has those same issues. Aren't those problems all over the country after all? The school probably just had to buy a dilapidated old bus cobbled together from random parts to make ends meet. And besides, she thinks as she watches her classmates pile onto the strange bus without a second thought, none of the other kids seem to think that there's anything weird going on. This must all just be in my head, she thinks. I'm probably just being weird because I'm so tired. I can't let myself become the new girl and the weird girl. The girl is startled as she hears a voice behind her. Hey! She turns and sees a boy that she recognizes. He sits behind her in class. They haven't spoken before now, but he seems friendly enough. You're the new kid in school, aren't you? He says. Yes, my family just moved to town. She tries to talk to him, but she can't help but keep getting distracted by the weird bus. Right. The boy glances at the bus, as if he can sense her discomfort with it. You worried about the bus? I was pretty nervous my first time riding it, but I don't worry about it anymore. You get used to it, he tells her. Right, she says. The girl feels her cheeks going red with embarrassment. She doesn't want her classmate to think that she's scared of riding a bus. What if he tells the other kids that she's frightened of a bus ride? They're all going to think that she's some kind of silly baby. I'm not scared of the bus. It is just a bus, right? The boy grins, as if he knows something that she doesn't know. The girl doesn't want to admit her fear, and so with a defiant step, she climbs the stairs and enters the bus. Once she's on board, her unease doesn't go away. The first thing that she notices is that there is no one in the driver's seat. That's weird. Did the driver just step away to use the bathroom or something?
Seems pretty irresponsible to leave the bus unattended. There's a line forming behind her, though, so she doesn't have time to think about this. She takes a seat and stares out the window, keeping to herself. The boy from her class follows and takes a seat next to her. It's a little wild at first, but trust me, you'll get used to it fast. In fact, some of us think it's kind of fun now. The girl blinks in confusion. Who is this weirdo that gets such a kick out of riding the bus? She almost wants to snap at him, to tell him that of course she's not scared of riding the bus. She's ridden the bus hundreds of times back at her old school. But at the same time, there's definitely something weird going on here. And as much as she's trying to play it cool, she's clearly not able to hide her feelings. This boy can easily sense that she's uncomfortable. Suddenly, the bus lurches into action and pulls away from the curb. But wait, how can this be? She never saw the driver get back on board. The bus can't be driving itself, can it? She stands up in her seat and cranes her neck to see. Her eyes bulge from her head in fear and surprise as she realizes that, in fact, there's no one driving the bus at all. The driver's seat is empty and the wheel is turning by itself as the bus careens down the road. "Who's driving the bus?" she shouts, but the other kids barely even react to her outburst. Most of them are chattering amongst themselves, and only one or two turn to look at her briefly before shrugging and turning back to their own private conversations. A chorus of giggles behind her alert her to the fact that she's just completely embarrassed herself. "What's the matter, you scared?" calls an older boy from the back of the bus, guffawing loudly. "Of course no one's driving. Don't you know anything?" "Leave her alone," says the boy in the seat next to her. "It's her first time. She's never ridden the bus before." She's too panicked to correct him that, yes, she has been on the bus before, but not a bus like this one. "What's going on? We're all gonna die!" she cries, clutching at the seat in front of her in terror. Despite her fear, though, she can't help but notice that the bus isn't simply speeding into oblivion. The bus obeys all the traffic laws, stopping at stop signs and signaling before turns. It's almost as if the bus itself is alive and aware of what it's doing. "That's just how it is," says the boy next to her in a matter-of-fact voice as if he's anticipated her question. Apparently, this is a normal day for kids here in this Oklahoma town. The girl doesn't think she could ever get used to a bus that drives itself. But what comes next is going to prove to be even stranger. "But you might want to close your eyes for this next part," says the boy. The girl asks him what he means by that, but before he can answer, she feels a strange wave of sudden nausea overcome her. Her vision goes hazy, and the whole world seems to waver in her sight. But the sensation passes quickly, and everything is quickly back to normal. Or is it? She turns to look out the window. The city passing by is familiar. She can recognize many of the same buildings that she passed on her way to school this morning, but now they seem strangely altered. The structures are in advanced states of disrepair, with broken windows and boarded-up doors. The gutters are filled with trash and debris, and the streets seem to be abandoned. The bus takes a left turn down a side street, and the girl catches a brief glimpse of the town's city hall in the distance. She gasps. City Hall is on fire. Great gouts of hot red flame pouring from the shattered windows. Sirens echo through the air. The sky above is an ominous red, filled with angry storm clouds with jagged bolts of dry lightning dancing between the thunderheads, and she can see the funnel of a distant tornado making a touchdown in the hills. The bus briefly comes to a stop in front of the library, dutifully obeying a flickering traffic light. The library's windows are dark, but she can vaguely see shapes moving about inside. Electric sparks shoot from malfunctioning street lamps, and downed power cables flail like angry snakes in the street. It looks like some terrible natural disaster has hit the city. But what could it be? Surely she would have heard some warning while she was at school. It wouldn't have just carried on as usual in the classroom while the world outside burned. She turns to the boy next to her, a fearful question on her trembling lips. He seems to know what's going on. Otherwise, how could he be so eerily calm while everything outside the bus is falling apart or on fire? What happened to the city? Was there an earthquake? No, he would have felt it. Was there a hurricane? Every possible disaster scenario runs through her head as she desperately tries to think of an explanation. But what happens next reveals to her that there's no natural explanation for the strange sights that assail her eyes. As she watches through the window, a squadron of armed soldiers march down the street toward the darkened library. Suddenly, the doors fly open and people pour out, screaming as if they're being chased by some unspeakable evil. The girl expects that the soldiers must be here for disaster relief, but she is horrified when, instead of helping the escaping library patrons, they instead open fire upon the crowd. The girl screams in terror, but the other kids barely even notice. They're too busy talking or laughing. One kid is so disinterested in the spectacle outside that he's playing with a handheld game console rather than watch the carnage unfold. How can this be happening? Has the whole world gone crazy? She's filled with terror as she wonders, is the whole town under siege? Is her house still standing? Are her parents safe? Where is this bus even taking her? I told you that you might want to cover your eyes, says the boy next to her. The bus continues on its route, passing all sorts of terrifying sights. A parking lot has been transformed into a mass grave. She watches as uniformed police line up peaceful citizens against a brick wall to brutally execute them by firing squad. Mass riots are taking place in the town's central park. People are yelling obscenities and pounding one another into pulp, while armed law enforcement officers sweep in to escalate the situation. The air is thick with screams, gunfire, and the smell of burning bodies. The shopping mall is overrun with giant spiders, which chase screaming shoppers out of the exits. She sees rats as big as cars scurrying out of the alleyways, grabbing random people with their taloned paws and biting their heads off with their long, sharp incisors. On the distant hills, she can also make out the outlines of even stranger creatures that she cannot identify. Dinosaurs, aliens, demons. She doesn't come from a particularly religious family, but the sights that she sees today definitely make her think that she might be seeing a glimpse into the maw of hell itself. The girl has never seen anything so awful in all her life. To her surprise, several of the other kids cheer as the bus drives past a gaggle of walking corpses. They're mutilated and half decomposed, but somehow still mobile, shambling down the sidewalk and moaning. How can the other kids be enjoying this? Yeah, chant the kids. Zombies, that rules! Maybe we'll get to see them eat some brains for once, cries the older boy in the back of the bus with sudden glee. What is going on? Repeats the girl. It's just the usual bus ride, says the boy next to her. Don't worry, I felt the same way when I first started at this school, but it's really not so bad. I mean, it's kind of cool, isn't it? The girl opens her mouth to respond, but she's suddenly overcome with that familiar feeling of nausea. The world quivers briefly in front of her, and suddenly, everything is back to normal. The sky is clear and blue, the buildings are no longer dilapidated. People are bustling in the streets, going about their usual business. There's no sign of any of the horrors that she just witnessed. No fires, no soldiers, no monsters, and no zombies. The boy next to her commented that they must have been reaching someone's stop. From around the bus, she hears several other kids groan in frustration. They were hoping that they would get to see some exciting zombie carnage, but it looks like that show will have to wait for another time. The bus slowly comes to a halt, and the girl tenses as she hears the hiss of its air brakes. The door opens, and the girl realizes that the bus has stopped in front of her house. She's relieved to see that her house is standing, and she can see her mother gardening in the front yard, safe and sound. Was it all a dream? This is my stop, says the girl, standing up as if in a daze. The first time's always a little wild, says the boy as she leaves. Don't worry, tomorrow will be easier. The girl steps onto the curb and away from the bus. The doors close behind her, and the bus pulls away, continuing on its journey. Did you enjoy your first day of school today? Asks the girl's mother. The girl can only stare in shock as the bus drives away. What just happened? Did a self-driving bus just take her on a tour of hell before bringing her right to her own doorstep? Or did she really just imagine that whole experience? As you astute Foundation veterans have probably already put together, this new girl at school didn't imagine anything she just saw. That girl just had her first encounter with SCP-3583. At face value, SCP-3583 resembles an ordinary school bus, albeit one composed of completely random parts all held together by some unknown force. The bus is self-driving and in fact resists any attempt by a human to sit in the driver's seat. At some point, SCP-3583 became attached to a particular school in an undisclosed Oklahoma town for reasons the SCP Foundation still doesn't understand. Every school day, at 3:45 p.m., it appears outside of the school just as the school day comes to a close. The bus can hold up to 56 children and up to 8 adults. If it judges that not enough children have boarded, SCP-3583 will begin to honk its horn. The horn has a peculiar hypnotic effect on all children within hearing range. They will be compelled to drop whatever they are doing and board the bus, meaning that the bus has some innate cognitohazardous properties. If the bus still feels that it hasn't reached its quota, it will increase the volume of its horn until it has attracted enough children that it can begin its route. Depending on how many adults have boarded, SCP-3583 has 2 distinct patterns of behavior. If 4 or fewer adults are aboard, SCP-3583 enters behavior pattern 1. In this pattern, SCP-3583 will dematerialize and enter a parallel reality called SCP-3583-A. SCP-3583-A superficially resembles the normal geography of the same Oklahoma town, with some minor but very important changes. The typical city landscape is replaced with a hellish alternative full of crumbling architecture, marauding monsters, shambling zombies, fires and natural disasters, and instances of military violence and civil unrest. SCP-3583 will travel through this terrifying hell dimension along normal bus routes, studiously obeying all traffic laws and pausing to re-enter our own reality, only to deliver kids to their own homes. Interestingly, SCP-3583 only offers door-to-door service and ignores all conventionally posted bus stops. If 5 or more adults are aboard, SCP-3583 enters Behavior Pattern 2. In this pattern, SCP-3583 will travel to the sites of mass casualty events, seemingly arriving in the days or weeks preceding the incident, where it will circle the area for approximately 45 to 100 minutes. After this, it will enter Pattern 1, delivering each child passenger to their home, before then delivering its adult passengers home as well. Known mass casualty sites visited include Pompeii, Nanking, and the World Trade Center in New York. Passengers inside SCP-3583 can take photos or video through the bus window, and all footage shot from within SCP-3583 matches exactly with archive footage taken at the mass casualty site at the time that SCP-3583 supposedly visited. However, SCP-3583 itself has never been reported by witnesses at any site or seen in any archive footage of any site. Luckily, SCP-3583 has proven to be a boon to this struggling school district. The school principal noted that SCP-3583 has a better safety record than any human driver. In addition, it never calls in sick and is never late for a pickup or drop-off. Every student that has received a ride in SCP-3583 has arrived safely, if a little shaken, at their home destination. And best of all, SCP-3583 is saving the school a lot of money on both driver pay and vehicle maintenance, money that the school has used to hire a new music teacher. The general consensus of the local community is that as long as SCP-3583 wants to work as a school bus and continues to do a good job, who are they to look a gift horse in the mouth? Although it still might behoove some of SCP-3583's more sensitive riders to shut their eyes and plug their ears until they get safely home. The SCP Foundation first became aware of SCP-3583 when students began posting cell phone footage of their rides online. Although the Foundation has successfully scrubbed information about SCP-3583 from the internet, it has been less successful in figuring out what to do with the so-called school bus from hell. Foundation field agents are so far unable to explain SCP-3583's motive or operations. Conventional attempts to contain SCP-3583, such as impounding the bus or towing it to the junkyard, are futile. SCP-3583 will immediately dematerialize, falling apart into a rubble of disparate bus parts as the force binding it together appears to abandon this plane. However, SCP-3583 will always return the next school day, ready and willing to begin its afternoon shift. Agents have considered closing the affected school, but feared that would only move the problem, as SCP-3583 would simply attach itself to another school. The SCP Foundation is currently monitoring the situation and has several agents embedded within the school district posing as regular staff. Because of this immense difficulty in containment, SCP-3583 has been given the Keter Object Class. Considering the number of SCP anomalies that involve horrific bodily harm being done to their victims, it's honestly a breath of fresh air to be dealing with one this seemingly benevolent. A little post-traumatic stress disorder aside, of course. And while Hell Bus may be what most around the Foundation have taken to referring to this particular anomaly, I'm going to stick to my own name, the Tragic School Bus. The High Priest, adorned in the finest purple ceremonial robes, stands before the great, bull-headed statue in the darkened belly of the castle. The year is 850 CE. Masked worshippers whisper chants of holy reverence on all sides. He is in his element. Everything they do in service of the great god Moloch. All around them, banners bearing the sigil of the Brazen Heart hang. It's a celebration. Just a few hours earlier, their forces had invaded an enemy church in the hills. They'd slaughtered most of the congregation in a sudden whirlwind of bloody violence, staining their swords in the great Moloch's name. But as the High Priest had ordered, some of these blaspheming Christian churchgoers were taken prisoner and brought back to the castle for questioning. Here, the High Priest would deal with them himself. A sadistic, tooth-bearing grin crosses his face at the very thought of it. Soon after the ceremony, the High Priest descends into the dungeon, which he'd taken with a certain flourish to calling the Game Room. Here he keeps his private collection of torture tools from around the world. each of which he takes great pleasure in using against the worms who refuse to bend the knee to his bloodthirsty god. In the game room, the air is suffused with the stink of blood and sweat. The prisoners who still have tongues start to scream when the High Priest enters, knowing that everything is about to get so much worse for them. He's cultivated a certain reputation as a man willing to do anything to ensure the superiority of his infamous cult, the Brazen Heart. If ever you fell into his terrible clutches, escape was out of the question. The very best you could possibly hope for was a mercifully quick death. In the corner of the room, one unfortunate captive was twisted and shattered against a breaking wheel, but still torturously alive. In the corner across from him, another prisoner bleeds from the inside of a grimacing Iron Maiden that the High Priest had overseen the construction of personally. But that was only the very beginning of the High Priest's collection of terrible instruments. Prisoners teeter in agony on Judas cradles and Spanish donkeys. Skin is stretched and bones are cracked on racks. Some are pierced as they sit on the monstrous iron chair, while others simmer away in great vats of oil. Some scream as they hang from their wrists on the 10th round of strappado. Lead sprinklers, Spanish ticklers, thumb screws, crocodile shears, choke pears, melee boots, heretics' forks, bastinado sticks, scolds' bridles, scavengers' daughters. The High Priest has all of them, and he's adept at using them. But they all pale in comparison to his favorite piece, a prized possession, gifted from the bosom of Moloch himself, the Liar's Cradle. Such a perfectly ingenious tool for physical pain and mental terror, it's positioned at the very center of the game room, just so every other prisoner in every other device can see him using it and know that it's their eventual fate. A mighty stone furnace with huge metal grates on either side. As the High Priest approaches, he can see a terrified prisoner already writhing within the machine. When the prisoner sees him, the fear only gets worse. The High Priest would have no mercy for him. He'd spent 10 hours on the breaking wheel before this, and that felt like a pleasant sleep in a comfy king-sized bed compared to what he was about to endure. Two of the High Priest's sadistic acolytes jab at him through the grates with red-hot pokers. The High Priest grins and asks the prisoner what village he hails from. When the villager surrenders the information, the High Priest gives a sagely nod. He asks how old the prisoner is, and the prisoner says 27. Again, the High Priest nods. He asks the prisoner whether he would like to leave and be with his family again, and of course, the prisoner replies yes. He has no idea that they're all already dead. The High Priest smiles and says, "Just one more question then, and you'll be free to go. What is my true name?" The prisoner pauses for a moment, which earns them another jab with the poker. He tells the High Priest that he doesn't know. He's jabbed again, and again, and again. He begins to cry and starts apologizing. He doesn't know the High Priest's true name. How could he possibly tell him, no matter how much he's tormented? The High Priest says, "Well, just give me your best guess. Who knows? Perhaps you'll be lucky." The game room falls silent, all eyes on the prisoner in the Liar's Cradle. His lip trembles, knowing from the dark legends what will happen when he answers. He breathes a ragged sigh, accepts his fate, and guesses incorrectly. Suddenly, the prisoner screams as he catches fire. The High Priest watches with unrestrained glee as the prisoner burns. He does so for around a minute, the fire burning far more intensely than it possibly should have. By the time it's done, the pile of ashes that was once the prisoner falls through the grate in the bottom of the Liar's Cradle. The High Priest turns to the rest of the room and asks, "Who's next?" Of all the many adjectives you could use to describe SCP-2128, also known as the Liar's Cradle, humane certainly isn't high on the list. This antique stone furnace was discovered deep in the dungeons of an undisclosed castle, believed to be a former refuge of a fringe occultic group known as the Brazen Heart, a cult of worshippers of the Canaanite deity Moloch, an entity mentioned several times in the Hebrew Bible. Among the deity's most notable traits is its bull-like appearance and the fact it requests burned human sacrifices. This feels extremely relevant, given the fact that the Liar's Cradle is all about giving its victims a fiery end. While the thaumaturgic methods used by members of the Brazen Hand to create the Liar's Cradle is unknown, what is clear are the cradle's capabilities and functions. When a human being is placed within the cradle and asked questions, a single lie will lead to them being anomalously incinerated. and the device's purview for a lie is frighteningly wide. A victim will be incinerated if something they say is factually untrue, regardless of the victim's personal knowledge. In other words, ignorance as an excuse will not save you. While the Brazen Heart was wiped out hundreds of years ago by soldiers of the Spanish Inquisition, the SCP Foundation has been able to glean some background information about the Liar's Cradle from a surviving document, a sheepskin scroll known as the Ignis Manuscript. This revealed that the cradle was invented around the 9th century CE, before being walled up in 1021 CE, and during its heyday, it was used as a torture device by Brazen Hand members against their enemies. While most torture is actually incredibly ineffective at getting information, studies have shown that under states of extreme duress, victims will simply say what they believe their captors want to hear in order to make the suffering stop. The Liar's Cradle is an excellent method of wringing information out of captives. Well, aside from the fact that one lie means the captive is immediately reduced to ashes. You see, SCP-2128 works on a true or false binary operating system that seems to imply an innate awareness of all knowledge. If you have enough captives to burn and know the right deductive or inductive questions to ask, it's possible to know almost anything in enough time. It's believed the Brazen Heart used the Liar's Cradle both for practical purposes and their own twisted amusement. Victims would be placed in the device and have their feet prodded with hot pokers while they were asked a series of increasingly probing questions about their life, being forced to divulge extremely dark and personal secrets or meet their doom on the pyre. It was a depraved combination of physical and mental torture. If even hearing about all this makes you feel a little queasy, nobody could blame you for that. The SCP Foundation, however, looked at the Liar's Cradle and saw incredible potential. As mentioned earlier, the Liar's Cradle bases its judgment on raw factual knowledge, not the knowledge of its particular victims, so anyone with enough people to burn can conceivably work their way towards discovering any binary answer. And given that the SCP Foundation has an almost unlimited number of D-Class personnel at their disposal, it didn't take long for them to realize all the knowledge that was up for grabs. They just need to make a few sacrifices along the way, hoping to save more people in the long run. Moloch himself would probably be proud. It was this somewhat morally dubious chain of thought that led to the creation of Experimental Protocol 37 Sparafusel, the Foundation's plan to utilize the Liar's Cradle to discover more information that would assist in their mission to contain anomalies and protect the human race. The protocol is outlined in a 5-step procedure that is as follows. 1. One D-Class employee, referred to as the Messenger, will be laid inside SCP-2128. 2. The Messenger will repeat statements as instructed from the prepared list. 3. After each statement, if the Messenger remains unharmed, the statement is to be marked as true. 4. As soon as the Messenger is incinerated, a new Messenger is to be provided. The statement that triggered the incineration is to be marked as false. 5. A new Messenger will be assigned. Repeat as needed. While the total extent of these tests remains off the record, the official files on SCP-2128 have some fascinating supplementals about some of the results of Experimental Protocol 37 Sparafusel. The first set of tests was designated EP-37 Sparafusel-22, Keter Checkup, and was conducted on January 10, 2014. The messenger in this case was D-6238. The first statement this D-Class was fed was, "The human race is in danger of extinction right now." Seeing as D-6238 didn't immediately go up in flames, this was found to be true. The second statement was, "The danger comes from an item in Foundation custody." Much to the relief of the D-Class, this was also found to be true, and he lived to make another statement. This statement was, "The dangerous item in question is located at a site in North America." This was, sadly, the D-Class's last words, as this statement proved to be false, and he was immediately burned to death for his troubles. The next messenger brought in was a woman now known as D-6239, after she committed an armed robbery that killed several innocents and landed her on death row. Her statement was, "The dangerous item in question is located at a site in Europe." This caused her to be immediately incinerated. The SCP Foundation then continued to narrow their focus on this matter over the next 13 D-Classes. With the information they gained, they were able to narrow down that SCP-752, a subspecies of humans who are eager to displace and replace non-anomalous humanity, would be the cause of a containment breach that could potentially end the human race's dominance if they weren't stopped. D-6253 was given the statement, "SCP-752 will breach containment within the next month." The answer was true. Next came SCP-752 will breach containment within the next week. Also, this proved to be true. D6253 would finally meet their maker with the false statement SCP-752 will breach containment tomorrow. But this opened the door for the final correct answer delivered to us by D6254 that SCP-752 will breach containment today. Armed with this vital information in the nick of time, the Foundation dispatched MTF New 7, also known as Hammer Down, their largest and most well-armed mobile task force, to the site in question. This quick thinking allowed them to quell the threat at the exact right time and save the world from an SK-class dominance shift scenario that would have left humanity in the dust. Using the Liar's Cradle, the SCP Foundation had just saved the world as we know it, and all it had taken was a handful of D-class lives. So naturally, the tests with the Liar's Cradle didn't stop there. Next came EP-37 Sparafusel-23, Knowledge Measure. As the name suggests, this test hoped to ascertain the extent of the knowledge the Liar's Cradle possessed, seeing as it could continue to come in handy for Foundation purposes. The first messenger was D7784, who was fed the statement, SCP-2128 knows everything. This turned out to be false and led to the D-Class's immediate incineration. However, the lead researcher on the case decided to take a different approach. Perhaps, he thought, the Liar's Cradle didn't accept the numerical designation that the Foundation had placed on it. The next messenger, D7785, led with the statement, the Liar's Cradle knows everything, which proved true, because that allowed him to live long enough to be incinerated by his next statement, the Liar's Cradle will tell us everything. After his incineration, D7786 stepped up to the metaphorical plate, first saying, the Liar's Cradle will tell me everything I need to know. The Cradle judged this to be true. It did not, however, take kindly to, the Liar's Cradle will tell the Foundation everything they need to know. It declared this statement false by immediately incinerating the D-Class. After this incineration, the EP-37 Sparafusel project was out of its daily allotted D-Classes and decided to call it a night. Their next test was the mysterious and controversial EP-37 Sparafusel-24 Sunday School song, which utilized D7891 as its messenger. She was fed the statement, Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world. The results of this particular test have been permanently expunged from SCP Foundation records. Next came EP-37 Sparafusel-25 Pinocchio Paradox, which was an experiment intended to see how the Liar's Cradle would react to logical paradoxes. Spoilers, it doesn't involve as much incineration as you might expect. First came D8232, who provided the statement, telling the Liar's Cradle a paradox is dangerous to Foundation personnel. This was proven to be false, and ironically, he was burned alive immediately. Next came D8233 with the statement, the Liar's Cradle is going to kill me right now. The Liar's Cradle bent its own rules by declaring this false, but only incinerating the D-Class enough to permanently disfigure him rather than killing him. D8234 was shoved into the Cradle after that, making the statement, the Liar's Cradle is going to burn me right now. This was proven through empirical observation to be false. 10 seconds passed without incineration. However, when D8234 exited the Cradle, he complained about sustaining a small cut on one of the rocks that made the Cradle while climbing out of it. This caused D8234 to rapidly succumb to a previously undiscovered form of gangrene and pass away in minutes. Finally, D8235 entered and said, the Liar's Cradle is going to inflict physical harm upon me right now. This was proven false, and D8235 climbed out of the Liar's Cradle unharmed. At this point, however, he began to cry and scream out the word, goodbye, before dying via altogether more unpleasant means that I don't wish to discuss in great detail here. The last experiment we have on record here is EP-37 Sparafusel-26, Subjective Opinion, which intended to see if the Liar's Cradle liked to turn logical gray areas into logical charred black areas. Messenger 1, D9224, made the relatively uncontroversial statement, golden retrievers are cute. The Cradle seemed to disagree, immediately incinerating him. The next messenger, D9225, delivered the counterpoint, golden retrievers are ugly. And just like that, he was up in smoke. However, when Messenger 3, D9226, delivered the wildcard statement, golden retrievers are tasty, everyone in attendance was surprised to find the Liar's Cradle completely agreed with this. When D9226 delivered the completely understandable reaction, wait, what? That's freaking nasty. He was immediately reduced to ashes by the Cradle's flames. With this line of questioning concluded in the strangest manner possible, the new messenger, D-9227, was brought in. Before becoming a member of D-Class personnel, his name was Stephen Kemp, a cannibalistic serial killer who'd murdered and eaten 14 women before being captured, tried, and put on death row for his crimes. He delivered the statement, "I'm a good person." Surprisingly, the Cradle felt this was true and let him live. However, when Stephen decided to get cocky and chime in with, "Joke's on you, jackasses, apparently I'm Mother Teresa," he was immediately incinerated due to the fact that he was not, in fact, Mother Teresa. His ashes were soon accompanied by that of D-9228, who made the statement, "The liar's cradle is sometimes incorrect," before being burned to death. Next came D-9229, who allowed for the longest streak of unbroken statements in the history of tests performed on the liar's cradle. He said, "The liar's cradle speaks only infallible empirical truth." True. He said, "The liar's cradle is hungry." True. He said, "The liar's cradle's hunger can never be satiated, no matter how full it becomes." True. He said, "The liar's cradle would like to incinerate me right now." True. He said, "The liar's cradle is growing impatient." True. He said, "The liar's cradle sees delicious, warm meat on its plate and would very much like to be fed." True. He said, "The liar's cradle is angry that it is continually denied its meat." True. He said, "People meat is delicious." True. He said, "I am delicious." True. He said, "My skin is warm." True. He said, "The crackling of fire upon boiling drips of fat and rapidly cauterizing flesh gives the liar's cradle pleasure." True. After such an incredible streak that also allowed for a frightening insight into the apparent personality of the liar's cradle, D-9229 was withdrawn alive. He was replaced by D-9230, who said, "The Earth is round," and was immediately incinerated. It's widely believed that this outcome came from the liar's cradle maliciously interpreting Earth as dirt, rather than the planet Earth, just so it could incinerate the subject. Just because the liar's cradle is largely objective doesn't mean it isn't incredibly petty, it would seem. Because of the static nature of SCP-2128, it has been given the rare, safe object class. Containment Site 403 has been built around the castle that currently holds SCP-2128, and a healthy supply of D-Class personnel is regularly siphoned off for EP-37 Sparafusel. The sadistic sorcerers of the Brazen Heart may be long gone, but in a strange and disturbing twist of fate, the researchers of the SCP Foundation are keeping the spirit of their work alive even today.
It's late at night, and you're driving down a desolate stretch of highway somewhere in New Mexico. There's nothing out here except for you, your car, and the road. What you don't know is that you're about to encounter something. Something terrifying. There's no moon, and the sky is pitch black. Your own car is barely lighting up the dark road ahead of you. Just then, you spot something in your rearview mirror. It's a pair of headlights. There's nothing too strange about them, except that they are especially bright. Your eyes are so adjusted to the darkness that you have to look away. When you glance in the mirror again, you see that they're closer. Much closer. They must be going awfully fast. You don't know why, but something about the car behind you makes you feel uneasy. There's something off. You speed up a little. Maybe you can keep some distance from them, but the lights keep getting closer. So you speed up a little more. Still, they gain on you, growing bigger and bigger in your rearview mirror. You're getting nervous. They look like they are barreling right towards you. You floor it. The lights are able to keep up easily, though, and now they're right on your tail. No matter how fast you go, they stay right behind you. The lights are so bright and close that they're almost blinding. You're in a full-blown panic. What is going on? Now the lights are swerving back and forth behind you. What do they want? You take a sharp turn without indicating, but they follow you without difficulty. You keep your foot smashed down on the accelerator. Your engine is screaming, but they just get closer and closer. They're right on your bumper. The bright white lights burn your eyes so bad that you swat at the rearview mirror to point it down. You look up just in time to see the deer standing in the middle of the road. You slam on your brakes as hard as you can. Your tires squeal loudly in the night, and you brace yourself to both hit the deer and get rear-ended from behind. You stop inches from the deer as something incredible happens. The two headlights seem to split.
passing by you on either side of your car. You and the deer lock eyes for a split second as if you're both thinking, "What was that?" before the deer hops away into the night. You don't know what's happening, but you're not going to wait around to find out. You throw the car in reverse and hit the gas before whipping it around 180 degrees. You can't remember how far the last town was, but there's no chance you're going in the direction of those lights. You drive as fast as you can, checking your mirror constantly to see if anything is behind you. Nothing. Just darkness. Maybe you're finally safe. No, they're right in front of you. The lights somehow appear out of nowhere right in front of your car. You turn the wheel hard to avoid a head-on collision and you go flying off the road, smashing your head against the window as the car goes flipping and rolling and tumbling. The car comes to a stop 100 feet off the road, upside down, with a lone blinking turn signal dimly lighting up the surrounding field. A single headlight approaches the car, but it's not moving like a vehicle. It's moving like an animal. You're concussed from the accident, and your vision is starting to fade. The last thing you see is a second light approaching. The next morning, the local sheriff is investigating the scene of a single car accident. Curiously, there's no body, just a few scraps of clothing and a pair of tennis shoes sitting neatly in the upside-down roof of the car. Strangest, though, are the childlike handprints all over the dirty car door. The sheriff doesn't know what to think. What the sheriff doesn't know is that he has just come upon the aftermath of an SCP-745 attack, a strange and mysterious creature known as the Headlights. SCP-745 is the classification the SCP Foundation has given to a bipedal, nocturnal predator, whose hunting grounds are an abandoned stretch of highway in northern New Mexico. SCP-745's most distinctive feature, by far, is its head, the top of which is a bloated sack of translucent skin. There are no visible sensory organs present on the head, nor does it appear to have a solid skull, and the creature's brain can be directly seen through the semi-transparent skin, which is covered in a web of bioluminescent organs. These organs are capable of producing a steady output of light that's been measured between 1400 to 3200 lumens, which is the equivalent of bright xenon gas headlights. The entity has been observed to have the ability to change the color of this light, as well as flash it in specific patterns. It is theorized that it engages in this behavior as a way to defend itself, and potentially may also use it as a way to communicate with other members of its species. The rest of SCP-745's body is covered in skin that is a deep, dark, black color that almost seems to absorb light. This quality, when paired with their blindingly bright head protrusion, gives the appearance of a floating point of light in the darkness. Because SCP-745 entities hunt almost exclusively in pairs, with their preferred hunting grounds being remote sections of highway, they are easily mistaken for oncoming or approaching headlights. Two SCP-745 entities are able to move together in perfect synchronicity, running in tandem at speeds up to 180 kilometers per hour. Together, they will target lone vehicles that they spot on the highway, and will begin to chase or run straight towards them, giving the unlucky driver the impression that a fast-moving car is rapidly approaching them. After they near the targeted car, they will attempt to stop it by any means necessary, whether by simply forcing the driver to pull over out of fear, or by running them off the road completely. Once their prey has stopped, crashed, or become otherwise incapacitated, the pair will stop moving together and approach the car separately to directly assault and then consume the vehicle's occupants. Next to no remains are left following an attack, save for a few scraps of clothing in the victim's shoes. Other than the damage sustained during the accident, there is never any other sign of struggle or forced entry, with the only other evidence left at the scene being the childlike handprints from SCP-745's small front paws. Strangely, analysis of SCP-745's genetic structure has revealed that unlike humans, they are not a carbon-based life form, meaning it is unlikely then that they are able to derive any nutrition from the consuming of human flesh. It is theorized then that they may be hunting solely for sport or some other form of perverse enjoyment. This question remains unanswered, as currently there are no recorded observations of SCP-745 feeding in the wild, as successful attacks have never left any witnesses, and specimens captured by the SCP Foundation refuse to eat it all. No lairs, nests, or other refuge of SCP-745 has ever been found, nor has the Foundation located any breeding grounds or young examples of the entity. It's unknown how or if they reproduce, or when they may have first appeared. What is known is that they had established a wide hunting territory across the American Southwest until Foundation teams began a program to thin their numbers in the 1960s. The effort appears to have been successful so far, and all recent sightings of SCP-745 have been limited to a specific stretch of highway in northern New Mexico. SCP-745 has been classified as Euclid, and in order to limit potential exposure to civilians, the Foundation has purchased the land surrounding the highway, with traffic being redirected to other roads. Foundation security teams disguised as highway patrol officers are to remove any trespassers or lost travelers who accidentally find themselves on the dangerous stretch of highway. The security teams are also tasked with attempting to capture any instances of SCP-745 that they can, and any recovered creatures, live or dead, are to be loaded into Class 3 BCU storage containers and transferred to Site-17 for further study. Containment procedures that are able to preserve living specimens are still being researched, and currently, no examples of SCP-745 have survived for more than a week in captivity. However, seeing as there have been no new sightings of SCP-745 outside of the isolated and monitored stretch of highway, and all reports of phantom lights elsewhere in the country have not pointed to evidence of additional SCP-745 outbreaks, they are considered to be effectively contained. It's late on a Saturday night in New York City, 11:55 p.m. to be exact. A man is running towards the subway station on 59th Street. He's just gotten off from work at the restaurant where he waits tables, and he's in a hurry to get home and spend some time with his girlfriend. As he approaches the station, he notices something strange. Someone has placed a wooden barrier in front of the entrance. The man has never seen something like this before, but he hasn't lived in Brooklyn very long. Everything about the station looks normal behind the barrier, and he's in a hurry. He doesn't want to have to go several blocks to the next station, so he hops the barrier. What's the worst that could happen? As the man walks onto the train platform, he starts to second-guess his decision. The platform is empty, and come to think of it, he hasn't seen anyone in the station at all. Maybe he did make a mistake. Maybe the station really is closed for repairs. He turns around to leave, but just as he does, he hears a train. Good. Everything is normal. He checks his watch. 11:57 p.m. on the dot. The train comes to a stop, and its doors slide open. It looks a little older than the trains he usually rides, but it appears to be in perfect shape, and it's going the direction of his home, so he steps on board. Just like the station and the platform, there's no one else on the train. Strange, but he's ridden nearly empty trains before, especially late at night, though usually at this time on a Saturday there's at least a few people on board. Just then, he hears something in the station. He turns to see someone running down the platform crying out. "Stop! Stop!" the man in the Mass Transit Authority vest cries, dropping what looks to be his dinner on the platform as he runs. While the MTA worker is still several feet away, the doors snap shut, and the train begins to move. The MTA worker cries out again to stop, but he knows there's no point. He watches as the train heads down the tracks and disappears into the darkness. With a sigh, he takes out a walkie-talkie and it squawks to life. "We've lost another one," he says. "Hi, I'm Dr. Bob, and this is SCP-052, also known as the Time-Traveling Train." SCP-052 appears to be a standard-looking Type R4 New York City subway train. Official city records state that the train was built in 1932 and decommissioned for scrap in 1975. Despite the fact that it should no longer exist, SCP-052 continues to appear on the Uptown AD track at the 59th Street and 8th Avenue station at exactly 11:57 p.m. every Saturday night. The train appears to be in perfect condition, just the same as when it was built over 80 years ago, and it is marked as an A train. Each Saturday, the train arrives at exactly the same time, opens its doors to accept or discharge passengers for precisely 5 minutes, then closes its doors and disappears until the next week. Where did the train come from? And where does it go in between the weekly appearances? These are questions the SCP Foundation is trying to answer, but perhaps the most frightening aspect of SCP-052 is that once you get on the train, there's no guarantee of ever getting off. Sadly, the majority of subjects that have been observed boarding SCP-052 have not been heard from again. The rare few that have been recovered claim to have boarded the train on various dates, ranging from 1976 all the way to the year 2204, with the latter claiming he thought he was boarding a special 300th anniversary train. Thus far, none of the recovered passengers have reported any memories or knowledge of their time on board the train between entering and exiting. Any passengers spotted disembarking from SCP-052 are to be immediately brought to Site 21 for questioning to determine their origin and assess whether they pose any threat to the current time stream. The Foundation has had great success administering Class A amnestics to passengers who arrived from the past and reintegrating them into society. But any passenger who is identified as being from the future must be held indefinitely to prevent potential disruptions to this reality's time stream, per Order 69-A1 from O5 Council Member 05-9. There are currently 26 recovered passengers being held at Site 21 who fit this description, and there are not yet any procedures in place that would allow for their safe release into modern society, nor has there been any workable theories for how to return them to their original home time. Despite the protocols in place to prevent public access, some passengers from the present have still managed to accidentally board SCP-052, and subjects from other times continue to appear. Following interviews, it's been discovered that some of these subjects arrived from alternate timelines and realities. This raises the question of whether it is possible for SCP-052 to appear in other times and places, which may require the containment of additional locations, and reports of any suspicious activity involving unscheduled trains are being monitored and investigated around the world. Following its initial discovery, several tests were attempted in order to better understand the anomalous train and what may be happening when it is no longer visible. The first test took place on May 31, 2009. An agent was told to simply board the train. They did as requested, and have yet to be recovered as of the present date. A second test took place a week later on June 6th. This agent too was never recovered, though reports indicate that he may have returned to our timeline in 1980, at which point he was killed in a confrontation that has since been classified. A third test was conducted the next week on June 13th. Once again, the agent was told to board the train and did so. This time, though, the agent returned. Just 2 weeks later, on June 27th, the agent stepped back off the train, with his hands appearing to have been surgically removed. A note had been placed in his pocket that had the simple message, "Send no more," written on it. The agent claims not to remember any of his experiences on the train over the 2 weeks he was gone, or what may have happened to his hands. Following this third test, O5 Command issued orders stopping the use of Foundation agents as passengers on SCP-052. D-Class, due to their disposable nature as convicted felons and death row inmates, were considered as potential replacements for the agents in the exploration of SCP-052, but the risk of releasing them into the past or the future was determined to be too great. Other than the agent who knowingly boarded the train, several other notable passengers have been recovered. One case involved the recovery of a woman who entered the train on July 14, 2012, but was recovered 4 years earlier on March 8, 2008. She entered the train while on her way home from the theater and was surprised to learn she traveled 4 years into the past. Because another version of her existed at the time she was recovered, she was held to prevent unwanted temporal effects. Another subject was recovered in 2008 who claimed to be from the year 1976. Although there was nothing physically wrong with him and no risk of time stream disruptions, Foundation psychiatrists recommended that he be held indefinitely, as 32 years was believed to be too long a period of time to successfully reintegrate into society. Perhaps the most interesting recovery was of a man claiming to be a Level 4 supervisor from the SCP Federation, who boarded the train in December of 2124. He said that he had been administered a Class A amnestic prior to boarding, and remembered nothing until his recovery in 2010. While the agent can clearly never be released into society, O5 Command has approved the sharing of classified information about various anomalies, in the hopes that he can provide additional information on possible containment procedures. Because SCP-052 has so far proven impossible to stop or remove from the New York City subway system, it has been classified as Euclid. But its predictable nature means that the Foundation is usually able to prevent the public from encountering it. The 59th Street ABCD station is closed to the public between 11 p.m. on Saturday night and 1 a.m. on Sunday morning, under the pretext of track maintenance. Any passengers seen leaving SCP-052 must be taken to Site 21 for debriefing and processing, and members of the public who simply see SCP-052 may be released after the administration of a Class B amnestic. As for what happens to most of the passengers who board SCP-052 and are never seen from again, we simply don't know.
Candace Hayes, we have thy confession. A witch as brazen as you shall be burned at the stake. The crowd gathered in the small room bursts into a cheer as the judge hands down the sentence. The accused woman doesn't react, though. She looks neither scared nor afraid, but simply resigned to her fate. No time is to be wasted in carrying out the punishment that the judge has decreed. A pair of constables grab the woman by the arms and take her away. A mob follows along as the woman is led through the town, taunting and jeering, calling her a witch, a wife of Satan, and worse names. She doesn't seem affected by them, though. In fact, she looks as if she can't even see them. Her attention is focused solely on one mysterious woman who walks along with the crowd, and yet somehow seems disconnected, as if she isn't truly there either. The two women maintain eye contact as the constables keep pushing the condemned woman along. They lead the woman outside of town to a tall hill. The ropes binding the woman's hands are cut, and she has just a moment to rub her sore wrists before she is forced to the ground and lashed to a piece of wood as another group tosses the last logs onto a nearby pile. Once she is securely tied down, the constables step away, but then another man wearing a hood approaches. He carries a large club and without hesitation begins beating her legs. The woman's composure finally breaks, and she cries in pain from the cracking of her bones. The crowd only cheers louder at the screams from the witch. The beating has left the woman's legs mangled, but this is far from over. The woman, still strapped to the wood, is placed on the pyre, where she hangs like a scarecrow above the combustible material. The judge steps forward out of the screaming mob, carrying a torch. He loudly exclaims that for her crimes, she will be burned until dead. But the judge doesn't step forward. He instead announces that another will have the honor of lighting the flame. Another man steps out of the crowd and takes the torch from the judge. He walks towards the pyre and looks up at the woman. She is exhausted from the beating, but she lifts her head. She doesn't look at the man with the torch, though. She's looking past him, locking eyes with the mysterious woman who walked along with the crowd. The man looks angry, slighted that she won't even meet his eyes in this final moment, and without another moment's hesitation, he tosses the torch onto the pyre. The wood lights instantly, the tinder combusting and turning into a huge roaring fire. The crowd also erupts into even louder cries of celebration as the woman screams from inside the blaze. The man watches as the woman is lost behind the fire and the smoke, and eventually, her cries too are hidden behind the crackles and pops of the flames. He doesn't move until the fire has nearly burned itself out. Most of the crowd has left at this point, having gone back to their homes, content with the role they played in doing the Lord's work. As the constables pull a charred torso down from the wood and unceremoniously toss it over a steep side of the hill, the man finally turns and starts to walk away, a tear rolling down his cheek. The judge approaches and places a hand on the man's shoulder. "There, the judge says, attempting to comfort the man. "You'll find a new wife soon enough." Hundreds of people were accused of witchcraft in colonial America, and while it is likely that many were falsely accused, there is reason to believe that some were under the influence of, or were themselves, what we now describe as anomalies. And SCP-3998 is just such an example, better known as the Wicker Witch Lives. SCP-3998 is a human cadaver which dates from the late 17th century that is covered in fourth-degree burns and is missing its legs. There is also evidence of extensive blunt force trauma, but it is not known if the beating or the burning was the ultimate cause of death. At some point, the remains were collected and fastened into a scarecrow that is held together with wicker, nails, and wire. While a scarecrow fashioned from a cadaver is rather unconventional, what brought SCP-3998 to the SCP Foundation's attention were its other anomalous attributes. It constantly secretes a flammable liquid from its bones that primarily consists of ethanol and human fat, and every night between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m., the corpse ignites. This fire doesn't cause any damage to the corpse, though, and it is unknown how it produces the flammable liquid or ignites. 3998 does not keep its flames to itself, though.
It appears that the SCP targets those who have either killed or physically abused a romantic partner, causing them to catch fire as large quantities of boiling ethanol appear in their stomach. Their midsection will eventually melt and then explode, leading to amputation of the lower half of their body. The fire burns both incredibly hot and unnaturally fast, and is unable to be put out until SCP-3998 is extinguished. A number of historical documents related to the case have been discovered and made available to Foundation researchers that shed light on SCP-3998, including excerpts from a 17th century diary belonging to a woman who lived near where the cadaver was discovered. In the entries, the woman describes attending the wedding of her neighbors, Aidan and Candace Hayes, though Candace did not seem especially happy with the arrangement. Candace is characterized as someone who likes to keep to herself and who does not conform to the era's idea of a good wife. As a result, it appears that she became the victim of abuse at the hand of her husband. The diarist hypothesizes that Candace has brought this fate upon herself due to her behavior, which may stem from her being under the hold of the devil. In other words, the neighbor believes that Candace is a witch. Others must have had the same suspicion, because we also have records of Candace's interview with a Judge William Stoughton, who questioned her about the accusations of consorting with evil spirits. Candace readily admitted to this, though she disagreed that it was in any way evil. She told the judge that the rituals and magics she practiced were not inherently good or bad, and that anyone was capable of using the same tools. She went on to explain that she hated her husband, that she had been forced to marry him, and that he had been nothing but cruel and violent towards her. Candace also mentioned a name, Clovis, that the judge assumed to be the demon that she had made her cursed pact with. Candace appeared to offer no defense or excuses for her actions, and the judge sentenced her to die by burning at the stake, with her husband, Aidan, being the one to light the fire. The story of this witch trial was typical of the time, and that likely would have been the end of what we know about SCP-3998. But another historical document was located that has truly given a new perspective to this anomaly. A sealed letter found in the cellar of a home that is addressed to Candace, though it appears to have been written after her death. The letter is from her secret lover and describes how they collected Candace's burnt bones from the bottom of the hill before binding them together with wicker and wire. The letter then describes how Candace's husband has recently restocked his own home with gin, which is well known to be extremely flammable. The letter ends with an affirmation of the writer's eternal love for Candace and is signed, Clovis. But perhaps the best information we have about the origin of SCP-3998 comes from an obscure local tale that was passed down orally for years and eventually documented on an urban legend website. The legend tells of a woman who promised her soul to a she-devil who taught her magic, but also offered companionship. When her husband found out, he contacted the local authorities and had the woman arrested. She was tried, her legs were broken, and she was hung up like a scarecrow before being burned alive. Her body was dumped off the side of a mountain, but the she-devil collected her bones and gave her life again. The need for revenge burned in the woman's heart, so in the middle of the night, she doused herself in her husband's gin, set herself on fire once more, and fell upon him as he slept, burning him alive so he could suffer the way that she did. SCP-3998 is currently held in a secure holding locker in Site-34 that is fireproofed and vacuum-sealed to prevent it from igniting. Every morning at 9 a.m., 3998 and its locker are cleaned to remove the secretions of flammable liquid. D-Class personnel who have been convicted of domestic abuse crimes are to always be kept at the site to ensure that they are the targets of SCP-3998, which, when it's not allowed to ignite, will result in them only feeling mild discomfort in their head and chest rather than spontaneous combustion. Due to its relatively easy method of containment, SCP-3998 has been classified as safe. However, recent developments have caused the Foundation to rethink this classification. Despite 3998 being securely contained, the number of arson-related homicides in the state of Massachusetts have actually increased following containment, with many showing the same damage to their body as would be expected in a victim of SCP-3998. And while it may be that these are the result of a yet uncaught serial killer who simply happens to employ similar methods of killing their victims, a recent re-examination of the SCP-3998 corpse has revealed more troubling details. The body of SCP-3998 does not belong to Candace Hayes, and in fact appears to be a male who was in his 30s at the time of his death. Following these new revelations, reclassification of SCP-3998 to Euclid is pending. Whether SCP-3998 is the body of Candace's husband Aiden, forced to endure an eternal punishment of burning again each and every night, or if it's some other unfortunate victim of a violent and painful death, is unknown, as is the ultimate fate of Candace and Clovis. But with the deaths that would appear to be attributable to SCP-3998 showing no signs of stopping despite containment, it can only be assumed that the Wicker Witch lives.
It started the moment she was born. No screams, no wails, just a single breath, a faint pulse, and then nothing. Her skin was too smooth, too perfect, like a doll's face. No creases, no expression, no eyes, no mouth, no ears, just a blank canvas. The doctor looked at her, then at the nurse. Neither of them said a word. They just stood there, silent. It was the kind of silence that fills the room when everyone knows something's wrong, but nobody wants to be the one to say it. The doctor cleared his throat.
It's not right,
he murmured. His voice shook just a little. He wasn't supposed to feel anything, not in his line of work, but there he was, staring at a child born with no face, his professionalism cracking like a cheap vase. The nurse, already crossing herself, looked away.
You think it's some kind of defect?
She whispered, her voice barely above a breath, as if speaking too loudly might make the child reel.
Defect?
The doctor's voice cracked. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit.
I don't know what it is, but I know it's not right.
The nurse shuddered.
Is it alive?
Her voice was full of dread. He hesitated. Couldn't finish the thought. He couldn't answer her. Was it alive? Fast forward several years, and she was still the same, silent, expressionless, and stuck in time like an exhibit in some sick museum. In the cold, dim halls of an orphanage, she drifted through the days like a ghost, watching, but never participating.
She doesn't even look human,
one of the kids muttered one day, watching her from across the room. The child never reacted. She couldn't. Her eyes, if she had any, were empty, her mouth non-existent. She was an enigma, and that terrified them.
I think she is human, but she's like, not.
Another whispered. He pulled his sleeves over his hands, like he was afraid her presence might touch him.
Don't look at her, she can feel it,
one of the older girls warned.
If she looks at you and you look back, I don't know what happens, but it's bad. Don't mess with her.
But none of the kids could stay away. They were too curious, too scared, and so they watched from a distance. And she didn't speak, didn't react, didn't do anything at all, really, except for one thing: survive, and not in the way anyone expected. Her skin, smooth and pliable, had strange, unnatural holes carved into it. No, her skin wasn't sick, it wasn't torn. These holes were deliberate. Someone had made them. They had a purpose. These were for food. They fed her like she was a machine. One of the caretakers, an older man with a wrinkled face and sunken eyes, eyed her curiously as the girl sat in her corner, unmoving.
You ever wonder why she doesn't need a mouth?
He asked the younger caretaker, who had just brought in a bowl of mush. The younger man shrugged, shaking his head.
She's just different.
The older man leaned closer, his gaze intense.
Yeah, well, that skin? Think it'll crack open and talk one day?
He looked back over at the girl.
I don't think it even can,
the younger caretaker muttered, almost in awe. And the girl didn't care. She didn't need to care. She was an observer, a passive participant in her own existence, floating in that weird space between life and nothingness. Not fully there, not fully gone. Everything stayed the same cold room, the same tasteless mush in a bowl pushed through the holes in her stomach for nourishment, the same curious, terrified stares from the other children. One day, like any other, the children sat in the worn-down dining hall. The little girl was in her usual corner, as always, untouched by the world. The constant hum of chatter and clatter barely registered with her. It was just noise. But there was always that tall, thin man, the caretaker who didn't say much. He watched her day after day with that quiet intensity that sent shivers down her spine. The others ignored him. They'd long since given up on asking what he was doing. One day he muttered to himself, barely audible,
"You'd think she'd blink."
The younger caretaker glanced up. What? The thin man didn't even look away from the girl.
"She's never blinked,"
he said slowly, his words a mix of fascination and disbelief.
Not once. Not since the day she got here." The younger man stared at the girl for a moment. "She doesn't have eyes." The thin man leaned in closer and whispered, "She doesn't move when she's supposed to." The younger man shrugged. Maybe she's just really good at being still. He wasn't paying attention anymore, but the thin man was. His notepad was already out, the pages filled with small, careful scribbles, observations, notes. He tracked her every movement, no matter how small, no matter how unsettling. He wasn't watching her like the others. He wasn't frightened. He was intrigued, obsessed. The little girl felt it, the weight of his eyes. She didn't know why, but she always felt it, like a pull, a gaze that dug into her skin. It wasn't like anyone else's. She couldn't see him, but she knew he was watching. But it wasn't in the casual way the other children watched her from across the room. No, he was watching her intently, like she was the only thing in the world worth looking at. He never spoke to her, never asked questions. He just observed. "Why do you stare at me?" she wanted to ask, but she never did. How could she? She didn't have a mouth to speak from. Was he waiting for something? Or was he just watching to see how far she would go before her skin tore her apart? Her 14th birthday came with a dull thud. No fanfare, no cake, no one even remembered. The orphanage didn't care, why would they? But she did. Something in her was changing, and she felt it. She didn't know what yet, but it was there, creeping through her body like a slow poison. The skin on her forearm began to shift, to ripple, like it wasn't quite attached anymore. A tiny, strange movement, too small for anyone else to notice, but she did. It started with a subtle shift, a tightness in her skin, like something invisible was trying to hold her still, trying to contain her, trying to stop her from breaking out. But her body, it was getting restless. Her epidermis, her skin, that strange smooth layer, began to stretch, pull, tighten, like a snug garment that no longer fits. It rippled, it twitched, desperate, like it was trying to get out, escape. She wanted to scream, but surprise, no mouth, no voice. And the caretaker? He noticed too. His eyes went wide, like he'd seen something precious. A grin slowly spread across his face as he scribbled frantically in his notebook, tapping his pen like he had a direct line to some unholy discovery. Autonomic movement, epidermal reaction, possibly independent action of the dermis, he muttered under his breath, a little too excited for someone who's been around kids like this for years. The children noticed it too. Well, some of them did. The others, too used to ignoring the strange girl, now turned their heads toward her. Eyes narrowed. Whispers slid through the room like poison.
"Look, she's doing something."
One of them gasped.
"She's moving. She's not dead."
Her skin was moving as if it had a mind of its own. And that's when he stepped forward, the caretaker, the one who'd been watching her, obsessing over her every movement. His face, typically unreadable, now twisted with what could only be described as clinical excitement. "You're hungry," he said, as if he were speaking to a child who'd been misbehaving. His voice was soft, almost too soft. "I'll fix that." Without waiting for a reaction, he grabbed the long feeding tubes from the table. His hands were trembling, but it wasn't from fear. It was from something else, something darker, something too excited. The tubes were long, cold, and sterile, and he shoved one through the holes in her skin before she could even react. The feeding system was supposed to work. It had always worked before, but not now. She felt the tube slide into her, pushing deep into her stomach. His hands moved quickly, forcefully. He didn't give her a chance to resist. "You need this," he muttered to himself, tapping the pump, watching as the mush of food began to flow. But the holes in her skin didn't line up with her stomach anymore. It was like trying to shove a square peg into a round hole. The food stuck. Her skin, once docile, pressed and squeezed, not letting anything pass. It rejected it. She could feel the food getting stuck, pressing against her insides. The pressure built, sharper and sharper, like her entire body was being stretched, suffocated by something that didn't belong. "Come on," he urged, as though coaxing a stubborn child to take a bite. "You'll feel better, just let it in." But the food wasn't going anywhere. Her skin fought back, squeezing tighter, pushing the food back through the tubes. And when he tried to pump more, the pressure became too much. Her stomach, her entire body, spasmed in resistance, the food sloshing painfully inside her as her body rejected it violently. The pain hit like a truck. It was so intense, so deep, that she couldn't think. It was maddening. She couldn't scream, not without a mouth, but if she could have, the sound would have echoed off the walls like a banshee's wail. She couldn't cry. If she had eyes, maybe tears would have fallen, but instead, the frustration rippled across her cheeks like phantom rivers. Her body twisted, bended, and each movement felt wrong, like her own body had betrayed her. Meanwhile, the room at the orphanage buzzed with the usual noise, scraping against metal bowls, feet shuffling across the worn floorboards, and the murmur of voices too bored to care. A boy in the corner watched her, a scrawny thing no older than 12. It wasn't the first time he'd noticed her oddities. He'd made faces behind her back, mimicked her jerky movements when he thought no one was looking. He had taunted her before, whispered insults, pulled faces, and laughed at her. Today was no different. The boy, shifting from foot to foot, narrowed his eyes. He was clearly intrigued by the way she struggled.
Don't you ever get tired of being broken?
He sneered, loud enough to be heard over the general din.
You've been like this forever, haven't you?
The little girl didn't even flinch. She didn't even acknowledge him. Her face remained turned away, her body jerking in strange, disjointed movements, like it was at war with itself.
Go ahead,
the boy continued, voice turning nastier.
Try to eat. Let's see how long it takes before you choke on your own skin, freak.
Something inside her snapped. She couldn't explain it. It wasn't planned, it wasn't rational, it was just there. A reflex, a violent surge. Before she could even think, her hand shot out, faster than she could control. She didn't feel it, not at first, but then the boy was no longer standing. He crumpled to the floor. She stood above him, trembling, her hands shaking. Her skin was alive beneath her, twitching, shifting, as though it couldn't believe what it had just done. The boy's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He gasped, struggling for breath, his fingers clawing at his throat. His eyes were wide, confused, panicked. Her skin rippled again, as if it was taking it all in. It was too much for her to understand. She took a slow step back, her body moving in a jerky, uncoordinated motion, like she wasn't in control anymore, like she never had been. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. The air was thick with the kind of silence that only happens when something awful is about to go down. Finally, someone screamed, a high-pitched, gut-wrenching sound that broke the stillness like glass shattering. One of the caretakers finally rushed forward and grabbed the little girl's arm roughly. She didn't resist. She couldn't. She barely even felt the pull of the hands that jerked her away from the boy's body. Her body, stiff as a board, moved only because the world forced it to. "Come on," one of the guards barked, his voice strained, his grip far too tight. She was dragged across the floor, the skin on her body twitching, squirming, like it was trying to escape the guard's hands. But she didn't fight. Her limbs were stiff, like her joints had forgotten how to bend properly. She felt like she was floating in her own body, trapped in a cage of her own making. The other children, pale with terror, watched her from their seats. Some turned away, some gasped. A few whispered, their voices barely audible.
Did she kill him?
One of them murmured, eyes wide with fear.
How could she do that?
The little girl's eyes, if you could even call them eyes, stared blankly at the floor as the guards marched her down the hallway. Their boots echoed off the empty walls like a drumbeat of doom. It was just her and the guards now, her stiff form, her skin still twitching in strange patterns. She didn't care about the whispers, about the looks. There was no room in her mind for them. Her world was nothing but the hard, unyielding pull of the guards' hands, dragging her further away from the only thing that still made sense, the boy, crumpled and still on the floor. She wasn't given a defense. There was no attempt to understand her. The court didn't even care. They saw only what they wanted to see. No voice, no explanation, just a blank canvas, a blank thing to fill with their own assumptions.
"Should have figured it out sooner,"
one of the jurors muttered, his voice heavy with distaste.
"Look at her. Empty."
A voice from the back, thin and trembling, asked,
"What is she?"
The judge didn't answer. He didn't need to. In the courtroom, she was a thing, a monster. Fear had already filled in all the gaps, like a kid filling a puzzle without the picture on the box. And fear was all they needed to sentence her. Guilt? No, they didn't need to prove it. She had already been convicted the moment they'd seen her, watched her move. And so the decision was simple. The little girl, silent, unmoving, was convicted on the spot. The sentence was handed down. She would spend the rest of her life behind bars. She didn't understand the sentence, didn't feel the weight of the words. She couldn't feel anything anymore. Her skin twitched, but the rest of her was a blank slate, a void. She was dragged back to her cell, her stiff body moving mechanically. The cell itself was small, barely larger than a closet. The The walls were thick and damp, made of stone that could probably absorb the screams of anyone unlucky enough to spend time in here. If she had a nose, she would have smelled the mold that clung to the cracks, but that was a luxury she wasn't born with. The guards who stood outside her cell didn't speak much. They didn't need to. They had no need to fill the silence. What they did have was their eyes, and oh, how they watched. They watched through the tiny slit in the door, their gazes fixed on her as she stood there, twitching, jerking, moving like something inhuman. They couldn't look away.
Can't stop staring, can you?
One of the janitors chuckled darkly, as if the discomfort was amusing. One of the guards snorted, but still, they couldn't stop watching, even if they wanted to. Days blurred together in the cell. Time lost all meaning. Just one long, agonizing stretch where hunger clawed at her mind and her skin continued to rebel. It stretched and pulled, tightening around her like a straitjacket that wouldn't fit. It burned. The skin stretched so much, it felt like it might tear itself apart. But it didn't. It just hardened more, digging into her like the walls of a tomb. Every moment felt like her body was becoming a prison, her prison, and there was no escape. The worst part, she couldn't move. Not anymore. Her body was frozen in place, not locked up like before, but completely stuck. It was as though time had stopped inside her skin, and her body had no say in it. Her thoughts, her mind, trapped. 11 days passed. Then the guards came. Their footsteps echoed in the hallway, slow and heavy. The sound grew louder, closer, the inevitable approach of something they'd been dreading, something they didn't know how to handle. But what they found wasn't what they expected. The guards stood frozen at the doorway for a long moment, eyes wide, breath caught in their throats. They'd seen bodies before, corpses. That wasn't new to them. But this wasn't that. It wasn't even a girl anymore. It wasn't human. Her body was hard, stone hard. The epidermis had petrified, merged with the stone walls of the cell. It was as if her skin had become one with the very room that held her captive. Her surface, cold and unyielding, gave no sign of life, no pulse, no breath. Her face, the face she had once had, was locked in an eternal grimace. Frozen in agony, she stood like someone who had suffered so much that it had carved itself into her skin, into her bones, but there was no one to hear it, no one to see it, just the image of torment, imprisoned, forever. One of the guards stepped closer, fear creeping into his voice, unsure of how to even approach this thing in front of him.
I don't think she's alive,
he muttered, half to himself, half to the others. The other guard didn't say anything. He just reached out, trembling, and touched her shoulder. His hand froze. The skin didn't move, didn't even warm under his touch. They took a step back.
She's gone,
one of the guards finally said, almost like he was talking to himself.
But she's not dead.
You see, what they didn't know, what the guards and caretakers couldn't understand, is that what happened to her skin, wasn't just some random, unexplained malfunction. It wasn't just an unlucky condition. It was SCP-6107, an anomaly that exists far beyond the simple understanding of human biology. Now, let me break it down for you because this is important. You're going to want to keep track of this. SCP-6107, colloquially known as the integumentary system, is a unique organ system. Normally, you've got your epidermis, your dermis, and your hypodermis, right? All the layers of your skin doing their thing, protecting you, keeping everything inside nice and safe. Simple, effective, we're all familiar with it. But SCP-6107, oh, it's a little different. You see, what makes SCP-6107 truly anomalous is that its skin, its epidermis, moves on its own. It has this weird autonomy. If the body experiences distress, if there's pain, trauma, even just an accumulation of tension, this skin reacts. It shifts, it pulls, it can stretch, it can tighten, it can even reject its own form. Imagine being trapped in a body that is constantly fighting against you. That's what this child experienced. But not only did it reject sustenance, it began to turn on her. And here's the kicker. The epidermis, the fourth and final layer of SCP-6107 skin, eventually hardens, petrifies, and locks the person inside. It's like her skin just decided it was done. Done with trying to keep the body alive. Done with functioning as a barrier. It becomes a prison. And once that happens, it's over. The transformation is complete. The body is stuck in that horrifying, immobile state, as if frozen in time,
trapped in a permanent state of distress. That's what they saw in the cell. But the science behind it, that's what really gets interesting. This isn't a disease, not exactly. It's a biological process, one that happens when the body's own integumentary system starts to move independently. And that movement, that transformation, isn't just for show. It's a defense mechanism, a response to stress, to stimuli that the body can't handle. The body's reacting in ways it shouldn't be able to. That's why it's so unsettling. It's not just a body, it's something alive, something fighting for its survival, even if it has to destroy itself to do it. Now, the epidermis doesn't just go from normal to stone all at once. There's a gradual progression. You'll notice the early stages, what we call dermal transference, where the skin begins to move independently of the other layers. This is the first sign something's wrong. You get this odd, almost involuntary shifting of the dermis. It's not like ordinary skin reactions, like when you get goosebumps or sweat. This is different. It's the dermis deciding on its own to fight against what's happening beneath it. It's a response, not from the brain, but from the skin itself. Next up, we get into the real kicker, the hypodermis. In most humans, the hypodermis, that fat layer below your skin, is just there. It stores fat, provides insulation, and keeps everything in place. But with SCP-6107, the hypodermis doesn't stay put. It reacts. It distends. It tenses. It's almost as if it's alive, moving like a fluid, trying to fight off whatever's causing the trauma. This is very rare. Most people's hypodermis just stays still, doing its job, but not with SCP-6107. Finally, we get to the petrification stage. The epidermis hardens fast. It solidifies into something more akin to cartilage or bone, almost like your skin is turning into stone. It's an irreversible, horrifying transformation. The body, which should be alive, becomes something frozen in time, a monument to something that went too far. It's not just dead, it's imprisoned. The process doesn't kill the person right away. The body can still function, but it's slowly, inexorably losing control. The mind, the thoughts, the humanity, it's all trapped inside this frozen, unfeeling shell. It's the last, tragic act of a body that no longer knows how to be. So what does all this mean? Why is this so important? Well, it's not just a weird medical phenomenon. It's an anomaly that blurs the line between life and death, between the natural and the unnatural. The child in the cell, she wasn't just a person. She was a victim of a process far beyond her control. And now, she's part of the anomaly, trapped forever in her own transformation. You see, SCP-6107 isn't just skin. It's a warning, a reminder of what happens when our bodies, when anything, decides it's done. And when it decides that, there's no going back. The ground rumbled. Not like thunder. No, this was more like something was angry. The young man's feet slapped against the earth, his breath coming in short, ragged bursts. Behind him was something enormous, something that shouldn't exist, but it did, and it was closing in. He didn't know exactly what it was, but it was hungry, and that was enough for him. He had heard the stories, bigger than a mountain, faster than a lightning bolt, teeth like jagged rocks. He was running for his life. The trees blurred as he dashed through them, the predator's growls vibrating in his bones. No time to think, just run. Then he saw it up ahead, the cave, the dark, inviting mouth of the cave. The young man didn't hesitate. He dove inside, nearly tripping over his own feet, hands scraping against the cold rock as he shoved his body deeper into the darkness. Then, silence. For all of 2 seconds. Thud, thud, thud. The growls outside the cave grew louder. It was still there. The creature had followed him in. There was no escape. He pressed himself against the cold stone, trying to slow his breathing, praying for the predator to... what? Get tired? Forget about him? Then, there were voices.
Go, go!
Someone hissed.
Push the rock!
The young man's eyes widened. Oh no. It was the tribe. They had been following him, apparently. They weren't just watching from a distance. They were playing their part, and it looked like they were really into it. A woman, the leader of the group, appeared from behind a bush, arms flailing dramatically.
Seal it! Seal it!
She shouted, looking way too enthusiastic for someone trying to trap a massive beast. A man next to her tried pushing a rock twice his size. It barely budged.
Get off me!
He growled, trying to wrangle it with all the grace of a half-drunk bear.
I swear this thing was lighter at the last rehearsal.
One by one, the tribe emerged, looking like a confused parade of squirrels who'd just remembered they were supposed to be doing something important. They scurried out of the bushes, arms full of rocks that were nowhere near as big as they needed to be. The entire scene felt like a bad play. One guy rolled a rock that was comically small and got stuck under it. Another two bickered over a particularly large one, trying to shove it up a hill like it was a toddler at a water park.
More rocks,
Yelled a third, as if they were building a house, not sealing a death trap. Through all this chaos, the young man barely had the energy to protest. He'd been running for his life, only to end up helping these people. If this wasn't the weirdest moment of his life, he didn't know what was. Finally, after some truly embarrassing grunting, pushing, and a very inappropriate dance involving a boulder, the entrance was sealed. There it was, the cave entrance, blocked by rocks that could have been knocked over by a strong gust of wind.
Done!
One of them shouted, hands on his hips like he'd just won a race. The tribe paused, looking at their work. They had somehow sealed in the beast with rocks that could barely stop a rabbit, let alone a monster that could probably crush a tree with its tail.
Well,
The leader said, nodding.
that should do it. Safe, for now.
The young man, now thoroughly bewildered, slumped against the cave wall.
For now?
He croaked, and that's when they started to celebrate. They sang a little song, something that sounded like a goose being stepped on while being dragged through the mud. It wasn't a pleasant melody, but it was full of enthusiasm. A young woman grabbed a bunch of random flowers, tossing them onto the ground like she was handing out raffle prizes at a carnival.
Thank you for your sacrifice,
she called, as if he had volunteered for this. Another person, clearly too happy for someone who was supposed to be helping seal a cave of doom, started doing a strange little jig. Their feet shuffled side to side in a way that could only be described as prehistoric dad dance moves. The young man stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the bizarre series of events. His legs ached, his chest burned, and his fate? Well, it was sealed, all right. The predator was trapped, and the tribe? Well, they thought they were safe. Little did they know, the real beast was still inside, waiting, hungry, watching. But for now, the tribe was oblivious. They were too busy dancing, singing, and congratulating themselves for their successful trap. And somewhere in the dark, the young man let out a long, tired sigh. Was this really what passed for a victory? Yes. Yes, it was. Thousands of years later, the cave had become a part of something much larger, a palace no less. The mouth of the cave had been hidden, buried beneath the mighty palace of King Minos of Crete. If anyone knew the truth about what mythical thing laid below, no one bothered to say anything. But the labyrinth was real. The endless maze beneath the palace, its twisting paths carved into the stone, had a reputation, and it wasn't just the locals who feared it. Every 9 years, the people of Athens were required to send a grim tribute, a procession of 7 sons and 7 daughters, sacrificed to the beast that lived in the maze. The Minotaur, as the prehistoric creature had come to be called, was a terror that even King Minos himself could not control. He didn't have to. The tribute kept the beast fed, the people of Athens in line, and the king's power unquestioned. But one year, a wrinkle in the plan appeared. Theseus, son of King Aegeus of Athens, volunteered. He wasn't going to be just another tribute. No, he had something else in mind. He'd heard the stories. The Minotaur had been contained once, long ago, and Theseus believed that this time he could finish it off, kill the beast, become a hero, and while the Greek gods watched, he would save Athens from the cruel demands of this Cretan king. When Theseus and the other tributes arrived on the island of Crete, they were met by a spectacle of grandeur and gold. The palace of King Minos stood tall, a monument to human ambition, while the labyrinth, dark and secretive, loomed beneath it. But Theseus wasn't concerned with the palace or the labyrinth's exterior. His mind was elsewhere, on Ariadne, the beautiful daughter of Minos. He saw her from the moment they landed, her eyes catching the sunlight, the perfect distraction. He knew what he had to do.
You should help me.
He whispered to her one evening at a dinner banquet.
I can kill the beast, but I can't do it alone.
Ariadne raised an eyebrow, the slightest hint of curiosity in her eyes.
Why should I help you?
She asked, arms crossed, as if she already knew what was coming.
Well,
Theseus grinned,
because if you don't, then I'll be stuck there forever. You don't want that, do you?
She scoffed, but the spark of interest was clear.
And why do you think you can kill the Minotaur?
Theseus flashed her a grin.
I'm born to be a hero.
She stared at him for a long moment, measuring him, and then shrugged.
All right, but if I help you, you have to come back and marry me, because my father will be really mad,
she said as she pulled a small ball of thread from her belt.
Oh, I will,
Theseus said confidently. Too confidently. He took the thread from her, understanding the plan. She would help him navigate the maze, but more than that, she would keep him alive. And so, with her help, Theseus ventured into the labyrinth. But let's get one thing straight. Theseus didn't kill the Minotaur. Oh no. According to the myth, that's how the story goes. Theseus is hailed as a hero who killed the beast and returned victorious, having overcome impossible odds. But that's not what really happened. What actually happened was a bit messier. The maze, like the tribe's dance, had its own rhythm, and as Theseus maneuvered through the twisting corridors, chasing the echo of his own footsteps, he realized the beast wasn't exactly what they said it was. Sure, it was terrifying, huge, and, yes, covered in muscle and fury, but it wasn't invincible. It wasn't unbeatable. It was, however, trappable. In the heart of the maze, the Minotaur lunged at him, teeth snapping, claws slashing through the air, and Theseus did the only thing he could think of. He ran. Fast. Using the thread Ariadne gave him, he darted through the maze, winding his way back and forth, weaving the string behind him like a breadcrumb trail. He could hear the beast following, but the closer he got to the exit, the less he cared about whether or not the Minotaur was still behind him. He'd made it. He was out. Ariadne waited at the entrance, and as soon as Theseus stepped into the light, he threw his arms up in triumph.
I did it, he shouted. I killed the Minotaur.
Ariadne looked at him, confused.
You... what?
I killed it, Theseus said again, more forcefully this time. He was sure he had. In the distance, there was a growl, low, rumbling. The beast was still alive, still waiting. Ariadne didn't say anything. She just stared at him for a long time. But Theseus had already started to walk away, claiming his mythical hero's victory. Ariadne watched him go, the ball of thread dangling loosely in her hands. She had helped him, yes, but she knew the truth. There had never been a hero here. A few more 1,000 years later, Crete, its ancient ruins now barely recognizable, had been pummeled by the fury of Nazi planes. But where buildings fell, something else rose. Discovery. Beneath the wreckage of the ancient Minoan palace, something had been waiting. It had been waiting for a long time. A group of Nazi soldiers scoured the rubble of the once great palace searching for loot. They weren't interested in ruins or history. No, they had been sent to collect anything that could be sold. Ancient Greek treasures? Perfect. Roman artifacts? Even better. But when one soldier knocked over a pile of broken stone, something caught his eye. It was an oddly shaped stone slab, embedded into the earth, covered in debris. It was like it had been forgotten, or perhaps hidden.
Hey, look at this!
He shouted, pulling at the stone with an eager grunt. The others rushed over. They had all been waiting for a lucky find like this. One of them, a bit too eager, grabbed a pickaxe and started hacking at the slab. After a few strikes, it cracked. The soldiers looked at each other. This wasn't just a tomb. No, this was a big one, the kind of tomb you don't find every day. The door was massive, thick stone and etched with strange carvings.
Should we open it?
One soldier asked, his voice sounding more like a question than a command.
Why not? We've come this far.
The Nazi officer in charge muttered, grinning. The entrance creaked open, revealing what appeared to be nothing but darkness. The soldiers stared at each other, unsure of what to make of it. One by one, they shuffled inside, expecting gold, maybe jewels, but definitely not whatever waited in the shadows. Inside, the space seemed far too big for the entrance, stretching endlessly, like the stone tomb was a portal to a place far beyond their expectations. The walls closed in around them. It was alive with a strange, anomalous energy, but they kept going. What else was there to do? They'd come this far.
Find the treasure,
the officer snapped,
and make it quick.
As they pushed forward, their flashlights flickered. Their hearts raced. It was only moments before one of them at the front screamed. A horrific, guttural roar echoed from somewhere deep in the maze. His body was gone, swallowed by the darkness. The rest of the soldiers froze, the air thick with fear. But the officer wasn't about to give up that easily.
We're not leaving without something. Move out,
he shouted, his eyes hardening.
Whatever it is, we have guns.
One by one, the soldiers continued to venture into the labyrinth. their breaths heavy, their steps unsure. They didn't know it yet, but they had just stepped into something that didn't follow the laws of nature. Only one man made it back to the entrance alive. He staggered out, his face pale, eyes wide with terror. In his hand, he clutched ancient gold jewelry, but there was no pride in his grip, only raw fear. The others were nowhere to be seen.
What happened?
One soldier asked, his voice barely a whisper.
There's something in there.
The man said, voice trembling.
A beast. It's not like anything we've seen. It's still in there, waiting. Don't.
His voice cracked.
Don't go back in.
The officer looked at him like he had just heard a joke.
You're telling me there's a beast?
He laughed, more to himself than anyone else.
I don't know what you saw, but there's treasure in there. And we're getting it.
The survivor shook his head. The Nazi soldier's smile faded. He pulled out his pistol, aiming it at the soldier.
You're going back in,
he said, his voice low and dangerous. The soldier froze, his body trembling.
I won't. You can't make me.
Without hesitation, the officer pulled the trigger. The body slumped to the ground, lifeless.
All right then,
the officer muttered, slipping the gun back into its holster. Clearly he was the one in charge now. He turned to the others.
Back up the tomb. We're taking this to England. There's a buyer. They've been paying top dollar for looted artifacts from Greece. And this thing,
he gestured to the dark entrance.
It's going to make us rich. They'll want it. We'll sell it. We'll be kings.
And just like that, the tomb, the maze, and the beast that lay in waiting was packed up and shipped off to England just like any other treasure. When the spoils of war arrived in England, they weren't just in crates marked fragile. No, they were delivered to the extravagant manor of a particularly wealthy English lord, a man who had spent his life collecting, no, curating, the finest treasures history had to offer. And now, with the war over, the spoils of conquest were his for the taking. Among his new acquisitions were priceless Parthenon sculptures, finely detailed pottery, and of course, the crown jewel, the tomb from the Minoan Palace in Crete. The tomb wasn't much to look at on the outside, just a plain stone box, really. But when the Lord opened it and peered inside, his eyes widened in disbelief. The space inside was vast. The whole thing was far bigger than it had any right to be. It didn't fit. It was like opening a cupboard and finding a whole new world inside. Naturally, the Lord wasn't about to dive into this mystery without a bit of flair. This, he decided, required a proper crew. So he hired the best and brightest, electricians, builders, plumbers, no more of this amateur nonsense. He was a man of taste. He had grand plans for the tomb.
Let's make this a proper exploration,
he declared, gesturing toward the labyrinth inside.
We'll run electrical lines through it. Light bulbs on the ceiling, a nice little chandelier in there for flair. It'll be a living space, you see. Very modern.
Naturally, he left the entrance door wide open. Who would dare steal from him? His home was practically a museum. He could trust the help. And so, the crew got to work. They strung wires through the corridors, placed light bulbs on the ceiling like they were installing lamps in a drawing room. They even found a curious little trickle of water running through the walls.
Ah,
the foreman said, rubbing his hands together with glee.
Nice bit of plumbing could make this even more impressive. Let's get some pipes in here, lads.
This way, the water wouldn't mess with the electrical equipment. He had the situation under control, or so he thought. As the crew began fitting the walls with pipes, the atmosphere grew thicker. The deeper they worked, the colder it seemed to get, but no one complained. After all, this was England, and it was winter. Everything was a bit chilly. That was when they heard it. A low rumble deep in the bowels of the tomb. Something growling. At first, they shrugged it off. Maybe it was the pipes shifting, the walls settling. But no, it grew louder. The foreman raised his head.
What in God's name was that?
His voice barely a whisper. The noise that erupted was enough to make the foreman drop his clipboard and run. The crew scrambled to pack up, but it was too late. The beast appeared, with claws and teeth, and a hunger no human could satisfy. Most of the crew didn't even make it to the door. By the time the last man bolted, the beast had already claimed its prize. One by one, the workers were picked off, their screams muffled by the thick stone walls. Only one man, a young carpenter, managed to escape. He ran, legs pumping, his heart a terrified rhythm in his chest. As he reached the entrance, he threw himself against the door, sealing it with all his might. The Lord, who had been sipping a brandy in the garden nearby, sauntered over, casually adjusting his waistcoat.
Well, what's the delay?
The carpenter, pale as a ghost, looked up at him with wild eyes.
There's a beast in there.
The carpenter gasped. The Lord raised an eyebrow, unfazed.
A beast, you say?
He asked, his tone laced with mockery.
Nonsense, it's just some animal. A wild boar.
It's an old tomb, nothing more. A little superstition to keep us all on edge.
He didn't even blink before pulling a cigar from his coat pocket.
You,
he said to the carpenter,
will go back in there. I'm not paying good money for a superstition.
You'll go in there and find the treasure. That's the job.
The carpenter tried to argue, but the Lord's gaze was cold. It was an order. The carpenter knew he didn't have a choice. With trembling hands, the carpenter unsealed the tomb, and the moment he opened it, the maze had changed again. The paths were different. The walls had moved, twisting like something alive. The carpenter froze.
No,
he whispered, stepping back.
I won't go in there again. It's not the same, it's...
Before he could finish, a gunshot rang out, cutting him off.
pathetic,
the Lord muttered, watching the carpenter fall. He wasn't even angry, just annoyed, as if a servant had broken a vase. The next day, a fresh team of workers reluctantly unsealed the tomb again. The Lord, as usual, was lounging nearby, sipping his brandy, looking far too pleased with himself for someone so oblivious. He could already taste the gold, the treasure, the profit. The foreman opened the door. The new crew stepped in, their boots crunching on the gravel floor. They had a little more confidence, having heard the fun story from the carpenter, but they also didn't quite know what to expect. And when they looked inside, they were dumbfounded.
Blimey,
one of them muttered. The maze had completely changed. The walls that had been one way the day before were now another. The path the previous crew had carefully mapped out was gone. No light fixtures, no pipes. Everything they'd worked on, gone, vanished, like a dream that slipped away as soon as you woke up. The foreman scratched his head.
All right, lads, let's get to work.
And work they did. They put in new electrical wires, strung up more lighting fixtures, and even found that same curious trickle of water in the walls. But as soon as they began installing new pipes to siphon off the water, they heard it. That same deep, low, guttural growl. The workers were attacked. A few managed to survive and refused to enter the tomb again. And so it continued. The door to the tomb was opened again the next morning, and the morning after that, and every single time the maze had changed. Walls shifted, paths disappeared, new turns appeared where there had been none. It was as if the tomb, the maze, was alive, changing, adapting, moving. Every time the workers managed to run some basic electrical lines and fit a few light bulbs, they would get close to digging into the walls to put in the pipes, and then the beast would strike. Every single time. It never stopped. One or two survivors would crawl out, their faces ashen, their bodies cut up, half crazed, babbling the same story. And each time, the Lord, gritting his teeth, would order the workers back in. And each time, the same thing would happen. The beast, the maze, the shifting walls. Finally, after years of this, the Lord grew old and tired of the maze, the beast, and the stupid treasure hunt.
Enough is enough,
the Lord said to himself one evening, sitting by the fire, nursing a glass of brandy.
I've spent enough time and money.
The rest of the treasures, the statues, the pottery, the pieces of the Parthenon of the ancient Greek Acropolis, well, those would all go to a museum, of course. They would make a proper display of it. But the tomb, that cursed tomb, that wouldn't go to the museum. The Lord had grown too fond of the idea of getting rid of it to really hand it over. So he had the tomb packed into a metal crate and sent off to one of the poorest parts of London, a slum littered with the unhoused, the forgotten. Within days, the first disappearances were reported. At first, no one thought much of it. People went missing all the time in the slums. No one bothered to ask why. But then the numbers grew. The story started to spread. Entire groups of unhoused people vanishing overnight. And what was worse, no trace was left behind. No signs of struggle, no blood. They were just gone. Eventually, the Foundation was pinged and immediately retrieved this anomaly for further research. This supposed tomb is actually a real anomaly and has been classified by the Foundation as SCP-432. It's a steel storage cabinet, 2 meters tall, 1.2 meters wide, and 1 meter deep. From the outside, it looks like an ordinary, albeit worn, piece of storage furniture, with its matte green exterior covered in corrosion and scratches from years of exposure. The doors are simple, fitted with a slide bolt and a padlock for security. But when one opens the doors, they're not greeted by shelves or a storage space. Instead, they're faced with an extra-dimensional labyrinth. The space inside seems to defy the normal laws of physics, as it's far larger than the cabinet's external dimensions suggest. Inside is a maze of corridors made of heavily rusted steel. The corridors are lit by flickering household light bulbs, many of which are broken. Some walls are lined with steel pipes carrying cold water, though the source and destination of this water are completely unknown. It's drinkable, but it contains low oxygen and traces of iron oxide. The maze itself is impossible to map accurately. Every time the cabinet is closed and reopened, the entrance shifts to a completely different part of the labyrinth. No one can predict how the layout will change. As for those who venture inside, there have been no confirmed survivors, only remains. Some suggest starvation is the cause, but there's also evidence pointing to something far more dangerous, SCP-432-1, a large predatory entity that inhabits the maze. Its exact species is still unidentified, but it has been responsible for the deaths of multiple personnel. Now there's more to this anomaly than just the danger it presents. Technology, GPS units, phones, remote devices, fails after traveling about 20 meters into the maze. The only form of communication that still works are high-gain radio transmissions, though even those become heavily interfered with the deeper you go. Several expeditions have been sent into SCP-432 with D-Class personnel in an attempt to map the interior, but progress has been slow and dangerous. No further expeditions can be authorized without approval from at least 2 Level 4 personnel. What we do know is that the cabinet was constructed in the early 1950s, but the artifacts recovered from the maze have been traced back to much earlier periods. This suggests the maze, and perhaps the cabinet itself, may be linked to something far older, something not yet fully understood. As for containment, SCP-432 remains locked at all times. The key is secured in a nearby security station and is guarded by 3 Level 3 personnel. There are no additional special containment procedures needed, but we must be vigilant. There's much more we don't know about this anomaly, and it's essential we continue studying it while keeping it contained. The hammer cracked the metal with a thud that caused the old wooden floor beneath him to rattle. Sparks flew, but the metal was refusing to cooperate again. Dripping sweat, he cursed under his breath and wiped his greasy hands on his pants. The place smelt of burnt oil, rust, and desperation, like the result of every other half-finished experiment scattered across the room. The basement had become a dumpster of failure, its floor littered with discarded weapons. The latest one, a mangled piece of junk, lay there with the others, looking just like the rest, a trophy of his mistakes. It was hot, too hot. But then again, there was no air conditioning in the makeshift lab. Not that the heat bothered him. The world outside, the real world, where the Argentine military junta was busy terrorizing guerrilla forces, was no concern of his. He was here. He was safe. Down in his concrete fortress, no one could interrupt him, except maybe his own mind, but that was another story. He had come to Argentina in the years following Germany's defeat. After the Allies liberated it, he fled, using his connections to slip away to Argentina, where there was a place for those like him. The scientist had put the past behind him. At least that's what he told himself. He swore that nothing would stop him from continuing his work, not even the fact that the world had already moved on from his twisted vision of the future. His hands shook as he dropped the hammer. The old wooden bench creaked under the weight of his frustration. For years, he'd tried to force this alien metal to cooperate, thinking it could be perfected. But it was inconsistent. It didn't bend to his will. Not yet. He didn't need this. The war was over, but he still hadn't finished. The defeat of Germany had been a failure, a mistake, and he was here to correct it, to finish what had been started. And what better way to do that than to create a weapon that could never run out of ammunition? The loud clang of the hammer hitting the metal was his only answer, followed by a trail of sparks. One more failed attempt. This wasn't the breakthrough he had been dreaming of. No, this was just another pile of junk that would gather dust. The gun, an MP-5K PDW submachine gun, refused to accept the strange alien metal, sputtering out sparks and misfires. But then, something caught his eye. The metal fused. It finally fused. This time he could feel it, a connection. He paused, wiped his brow, and stared at the gun. What were those white things where the bullets should be? He blinked. He stared harder. The chamber was filled with them. They looked like teeth. Jagged, sharp, a real mess. But human teeth. He pulled the trigger. A groan echoed through the room, coming from the weapon itself. Or was it the metal? Maybe it was just the sound of his brain breaking. The teeth fired. He stared at the weapon.
Teeth?
He mumbled, barely believing it himself. It was a submachine gun, not a dental office. He stared at the weird projectiles, unsure if this was what he wanted. This wasn't what he wanted.
Perfect,
he muttered, the sarcasm thick in his voice.
Sure, teeth. Why not?
The weapon groaned again, like it had just woken up from a long, bad dream. He pulled the trigger again. More teeth. He winced. This was not the ultimate weapon, not what he had been imagining while he'd sat in his basement for years, drenched in sweat and desperation. He stared at the teeth for a moment too long, then tossed the weapon aside like a disgruntled child throwing a toy away. It landed on the growing pile of failures. It didn't matter. It was just another flawed creation, one more mistake to add to the stack. But hey, that's how science worked, right? Fail, fail again, then maybe, just maybe, succeed. Eventually. But as he wiped his hands and stood, there was something eerily familiar about the way the weapon had grown. It sounded alive. Or perhaps it was just the stress getting to him. Either way, he had no time to dwell on it. He needed a break. The world outside was burning. But for now, the only thing he needed to fix was this stupid weapon. Just then, the house shuddered under the force of the first crash. The door upstairs was smashed in, wood splintering into jagged pieces. Soldiers piled into the small, darkened entryway like a swarm of locusts. They were coming. The scientist had no idea, of course. He was too deep in his self-imposed exile to care about the war raging outside, but they were coming. The Argentinian military, feeling the pressure of guerrilla forces nibbling away at their control, had gotten wind of an arms dealer supplying weapons, and, as luck would have it, they had been pointed in the direction of his little basement lab. An anonymous tip was all it took to set the military in motion. In their minds, they were storming a minor arms dealer's den. They didn't know he was a Nazi scientist, still hiding out in the shadows of a war that had ended decades ago. They didn't know they were about to bust in on a man who was redefining the future of weapons with teeth. The sound of boots thumping on the floorboard echoed through the house. The soldiers closed in fast. The scientist didn't register the intrusion. By the time he heard them, it was already too late. A soldier's voice shouted from above. It was muffled, but it was enough to snap the scientist into reality. He barely had time to scramble for the hidden drawers, frantically trying to shove his latest creation out of sight, hoping it would go unnoticed. His hands were greasy, his palms sweating from the adrenaline surge. He had spent days, weeks, even years on this work, and it was finally coming together, even if in ways he didn't understand. But the soldiers weren't going to care about his failures. They were going to destroy them. The basement door flew open with a violent crash. The scientist barely had time to reach for the nearest tool, a wrench, before he found himself staring up at the barrel of a rifle. A grizzled soldier stood there, framed in the doorway, eyes wide with the confidence that only a man with a weapon could have. The soldier didn't speak. He just gestured for the scientist to move back, motioning with his rifle, as if the scientist was already a defeated man. The military swarmed in, 4, maybe 5 soldiers, each with a weapon at the ready. They began tearing through the basement without hesitation. They rummaged through every shelf, throwing aside books, overturned flasks, and other equipment the scientist had meticulously organized. It wasn't that they cared about his work. It was that they had orders. Their eyes skimmed the basement like a scavenger looking for bones, their rifles swishing through the air with each swing. Old furniture was knocked over, clutter tossed aside, and the occasional broken part of an old weapon. The scientist stood against the wall, sweating, his throat dry as he swallowed. There was no way out. He glanced at his creations scattered on the table. What they were looking for was simple. Anything that could be used against them. Anything that didn't belong in a quiet, isolated home. One soldier lifted a rusted grenade off the table, studied it, and tossed it aside, useless. Another grabbed a gun that had long since stopped firing, shook it, and tossed it away in frustration. They didn't even look at the books on the shelves, the notebooks that had once carried his genius. To them, it was all just junk. But then, a young soldier found it. He was poking around in a corner, trying to stay low and keep his hands busy. He was just a kid, really, eyes wide with the excitement of being a part of something bigger. As he picked through the mess of discarded guns and strange contraptions, his hands brushed against something cool and smooth. A small shiver ran up his spine, and he glanced around quickly, but no one was paying attention. So, he pulled it out. The weapon. The MP5K PDW. It didn't look like much, at least not in comparison to the other firearms scattered around. It was almost elegant, sleek in a way that didn't seem to fit in with the rest of the gear. The soldier stood still for a moment, staring at it, unsure of what exactly he was holding. His mind didn't quite know how to make sense of it. Was it some secret Nazi weapon? A twisted relic of a bygone era, just like the scientist who'd built it? Maybe, but that didn't matter either. He could already hear the conversations back at base. Where did you get that? How much did it cost? It was a rare find. War memorabilia, a piece of history. He slipped it into his pack, hiding it among the other seized items. No one had to know about it. They wouldn't understand. But he would. The young soldier left the room, keeping the weapon hidden under his gear, his face grinning like a kid who'd just snatched something precious from the mess of war. And as he walked out of the basement, his thoughts were already racing ahead, imagining the stories he'd tell about this particular find. But he never got the chance to tell those stories. As the soldiers made their way back to base camp, guerrilla fighters ambushed them. The attack came without warning. Gunfire erupted from all sides, tearing through the jungle like a storm. The trees cracked and splintered under the weight of the bullets, and the screams of his comrades filled the air. The soldier's heart pounded in his chest, the chaos pushing him deeper into the mess. He scrambled for cover, throwing himself behind a thick tree trunk, the bark splintering under the hail of gunfire. He reached for his weapon, but it wasn't there. His eyes darted around, the sound of bullets whizzing past his head, until he saw it, lying on the ground where he dropped it in the scramble. Then, he remembered his keepsake. He pulled the strange weapon from his pack, the weight of it odd in his hands. It wasn't like any weapon he had ever used, but the more he looked at it, the more curious he became. It seemed to hum, almost alive. "Cover me!" his comrade yelled from behind a tree, firing his rifle at an unseen enemy. The soldier nodded, adrenaline pushing him forward, heart racing. He pressed the barrel of the MP5K against the trunk, aiming at the enemy fighters who were scattered in the underbrush ahead. The sound of the jungle was deafening. The screams of combatants, the roar of distant explosions, the high-pitched crack of rifle shots cutting through the humid air. He steadied his breath, sighted in on the figure moving through the trees, and squeezed the trigger. The weapon groaned, a sound that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Then, with a sickening feeling in his gut, he watched teeth shoot out, flying in a wide arc. He blinked. Teeth. They flew like jagged shrapnel, more akin to dental debris than bullets. The soldier watched in horror as the teeth struck the tree ahead of him with a dull clink, leaving only tiny gashes in the bark. He swore under his breath and pulled the trigger again. The teeth hit the ground in front of the gorillas. It wasn't enough. No force, no punch. "What is this?" he muttered to himself, his voice barely audible above the battle. He didn't have time to rethink it. Another gorilla fired at his position, forcing him to duck. The teeth weren't working the way a bullet should, but it didn't matter. He had to keep firing. It was all he had. He squeezed the trigger again and again. Teeth. More teeth. The gorillas, taking advantage of the ineffective fire, began charging forward. They moved in clusters, using the thick vegetation as cover. He needed to hold them off, and fast. "Reload!" someone shouted. The soldier was too slow to reload with regular ammo. There was no time. His heart raced as he pressed the trigger again, each tooth flying with a sickening clatter. Ineffective. Useless. But it worked for now. It kept the gorillas at bay, if only for a moment. The chaos of battle raged on. Explosions rocked the ground around him, sending dust and dirt into the air. He saw his comrade go down, his body crashing to the ground with a sickening thud. Another man fell beside him, his weapon knocked out of reach. "Get up! Get up!" the soldier screamed to his fallen comrades, not even sure if they could hear him. He took a breath, re-aimed, and pulled the trigger again. More teeth. This time, they struck. The gorilla he'd aimed at staggered back, but only from the shock. The teeth weren't lethal. They barely even hurt. The soldier watched as the gorilla raised his weapon, determined to fight back. But it was enough to buy the soldier some time. Just. He crouched lower, glancing at the weapon in his hands, and realized he was out of ammunition. Frantically, he opened the chamber, hoping, praying to find more. He grabbed the pouch of standard ammunition from his belt and tried to reload. The weapon didn't budge. It wouldn't accept the normal bullets. He tried again, slamming the magazine in harder, but the chamber refused to close. He was panicking. He looked back up to the battle. His comrades needed him, and all he had was this ridiculous weapon that shot teeth. The guerrilla forces were closing in. He could see them rushing forward, weapons raised. "Come on!" he yelled, struggling with the weapon. The heat of the battle was making everything feel like a blur, his breath ragged, sweat stinging his eyes, the world around him spinning. Just as he prepared to throw the weapon aside in frustration, he saw something strange. One of the teeth dropped from the chamber, and he froze. It rolled out, just like it had before. He stared at it, confused, realizing something he had missed. The weapon wasn't out of ammunition. It wasn't broken. It was waiting for its own regenerative ammunition. Before he could process this, another shot rang out from the trees, and the world went dark. The battle raged on around his crumpled body. Eventually, the guerrilla forces triumphed. The soldier's weapon, the strange weapon with the teeth, was left behind on the battlefield, unnoticed for just a moment. But one of the guerrilla fighters, eyes wild from the ferocity of the battle, spotted it. He crouched low, his fingers brushing over the cool metal of the weapon. He had seen it before, in the hands of the young soldier. Now it was his. He picked it up, feeling the strange weight of it in his hands. It was different, nothing like the rifles they used, nothing like the weapons they knew, but it was a weapon nonetheless, and it was valuable. He glanced down at the soldier's dog tag, still hanging from the man's neck, blood staining the metal. Without a second thought, he pulled it free, tucking it into his pouch as a reminder, a trophy, a victory, no matter how small. The weapon was his now, a souvenir from the battle that had been won. The guerrilla fighter moved through the jungle, the weapon slung over his shoulder, feeling its unfamiliar weight as he trekked back to his small, hidden village. He had seen the aftermath of the battle, the destruction and the dead. The victory had come at a cost, but nothing could prepare him for what awaited him when he reached his home. As he stepped through the trees, he saw the smoke rising in the distance. His heart sank. His stomach twisted. The air, thick with the smell of gunpowder and blood, burned his nostrils as he moved closer. When he reached the village, it was gone. His heart skipped a beat as his eyes fell on the bodies lying in the dirt. The military had come for them, just as they always did. They had taken everything: his family, his home, the children who had played in the fields, the elders who had whispered stories of resistance, his mother, his brother, his wife. Gone. Grief, pure and sharp, flooded his chest. He dropped to his knees, the weight of loss crushing him. It was his fault. He had led the attack. He had brought the battle to their doorstep. More soldiers were out there. They would pay for this. With trembling hands, he reached for his trophy weapon still hanging off his shoulder. He gripped the weapon tightly, the cold metal offering him a fleeting sense of control, of power. With anger coursing through him, he aimed the weapon at the undergrowth. With a guttural, agonizing scream, he pulled the trigger. Click. Nothing. The chamber was empty. Confused, he tried to reload it. Why wasn't it working? He twisted, turned, pulled at the magazine, but it refused to budge. In his frustration, he didn't notice the strange sensation at first, but then, as he looked closer, something was changing. The chamber of the weapon was wet, and in the place where the bullets should have been, there were teeth. He stared at the jagged teeth as they formed. It was madness. It was absurd. But it didn't matter anymore. The gravity of the situation hit him. He lowered the weapon, his hands falling to his sides. There was no fight left in him. The world had taken everything. The weapon, the teeth, the pain. It all felt like a cruel joke. And all he could do was stand there, numb, as the groaning weapon in his hands continued to grow its deadly supply of ammunition. There was no reason to stay anymore. The war had taken everything from him. The guerrilla fighter left the village, his heart as empty as the place he had once called home. The weapon was still with him, slung over his back like a cursed prize, a cruel reminder of the violence he had chosen to live by. He made his way out of the jungle, through the streets that had once been alive with the sounds of resistance, and now stood as silent witnesses to the destruction. There was nothing left for him in Argentina, nothing but ghosts. So he left. He packed what little he could, slipping out of the country, away from the conflict that had claimed so much. He headed north, to a place that promised peace, to the United States, a country he had heard of, but never seen. Maybe there, he thought, he could start over. The guerrilla fighter arrived in the United States with little more than the clothes on his back and the weapon still slung over his shoulder. The world was different here, strange and unfamiliar, but for him, it was just another place where he could hide. He wasn't running toward anything. He was running away from the war, from the faces of the dead, from the screams of his family. And maybe, he thought, he could leave the past behind. Maybe this new land would forget him, just as he hoped to forget the horrors he had witnessed. The guerrilla fighter found a small, quiet town tucked away in a forgotten corner of the world. He rented a small room in a dingy apartment complex, barely enough space for him and his thoughts, let alone the memories. He kept to himself, avoided the neighbors, and never spoke. The days bled into each other. He tried to forget the faces, the blood, the heat of the jungle, the stench of death, but it was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. Solitude became his only companion. His trophy weapon, with its teeth, remained by his side, like a sick, twisted reminder of everything that had been lost. He kept it hidden mostly, but it was always there, always waiting. As the years passed, the guerrilla fighter's paranoia deepened. The world, once a place of revolution and war, now felt like a ticking clock. Time was running out. The man became obsessed with the idea of survival. It wasn't enough to just live. He had to be ready for what came next. The doomsday prepper mentality took hold. He stocked up on everything: cans of food, water, bottles of medicine, and weapons. His small room became a fortress of supplies, stacked high with boxes and crates, like a madman preparing for an apocalypse. He hoarded weapons, a mix of everything he could find: old rifles, handguns, knives, tools, anything that could help him survive when the world came crashing down. He believed it would happen one day. The chaos would come back. He had seen it. He had lived it. He had felt it in his bones, and he would be ready. Every day, he would check his stockpiles, tighten security around his barricaded windows, and watch the news. Everything out there seemed to confirm it. The world was falling apart. Riots in the streets, governments on the brink of collapse, the signs were all there. He had no family, no friends, only his supplies, his weapons, and the weapon with the teeth, a relic of a time he couldn't let go of. The years took their toll. His hair grayed, his skin sagged, his body grew frail, yet his mind remained as sharp as ever. But the weight of solitude wore on him. He refused to confront the trauma of his past. He refused to look at the teeth, to remember the faces of his comrades who had fallen, or the family he had lost in the flames of war. He could no longer tell the difference between the nightmares and his waking life. Every corner of his small, isolated existence was consumed by the fear of what would come next. The world outside passed by without him. The neighbors came and went, their voices and laughter filtering through the walls, but he stayed silent. He had no need for human contact. He was preparing for the worst. His heart raced in the middle of the night, even though the world around him slept peacefully. He checked the locks on his windows, the cans of food stacked high, the weapon with the teeth always close by. Time marched on, but for him, it was just one long, endless day. The future was coming, but he couldn't bear to face it. Fear was all that remained. And then, one day, it came. The end. His body, frail and aging, gave out. No one noticed his passing right away. The neighbors went about their lives, oblivious to the man who had kept to himself for so many years. Days passed before anyone bothered to check on him. He was found alone in his room, surrounded by his supplies and weapons, all of it meaningless in the end. And beside him, still in his cold, stiff hand, was the weapon with the teeth, still waiting. His strange, isolated existence had raised no alarms until the ATF and FBI were notified about the vast arsenal found in his home. When the authorities arrived, the scene was as eerie as it was unsettling. Boxes of food stacked high in the corners, weapons piled like a jumbled treasure trove, and papers scattered haphazardly across the floor. The officers worked through the hoard in silence, cataloging everything they could find, marking the weapons with official tags. It wasn't long before one of them came across something that made him stop in his tracks. Tucked between a rusted rifle and a box of ammo clips he found the MP5K PDW, its strange, jagged chamber staring back at him. The teeth glinted in the dim light, human-like, unnervingly jagged, as though someone had intentionally jammed them into the chamber. The officer felt his gut twist, a sense of unease creeping into his chest. This was no ordinary firearm.
What is this thing?
He muttered under his breath, turning the weapon in his hands, unsure whether to be intrigued or horrified. He called over his partner. They examined it together, but neither of them could understand what they were looking at. No one in the department had encountered anything like it. Word got out about the strange weapon soon after, and it didn't take long before the SCP Foundation was alerted. The agents arrived with little fanfare, as they always did, their presence barely noticed amid the ongoing investigation. They moved quickly, their trained eyes scanning the collection for anything that stood out, and when they came across the MP5K PDW with the teeth, they knew they had found something significant. Their training had taught them to spot anomalies like this. The weapon wasn't just unusual, it was anomalous. At first glance, SCP-127 appears to be a standard MP5K PDW submachine gun, which would be nothing out of the ordinary. However, upon further analysis, it has been revealed that aside from its steel and polymer exterior, the entirety of the firearm is organic and alive. This living nature is not immediately obvious, but its biological components are present in every functional part of the weapon. One of the most striking aspects of SCP-127 is its ammunition, which initially appeared to be human-like teeth. DNA testing of these bullets revealed that they do not match any known species on Earth. They are something entirely unique, bizarre in their shape, composition, and origins. SCP-127 features two distinct firing modes, semi-automatic and fully automatic, with an audible groan when switching between the two modes. The weapon's magazine typically holds 60 shots, and once depleted, it takes approximately 3 to 5 days for the ammunition to fully regenerate. Attempts to remove the magazine have been unsuccessful, as it appears to be permanently integrated into the weapon. While SCP-127 does not appear to have any reproductive organs, as determined by scans, it does require water, calcium, and protein to remain functional and sustain its biological components. It is unclear how or why these materials are necessary, but they seem essential for its continued operation. While it poses no more immediate danger than any regular firearm, its unusual properties require specific containment measures. It is to be stored in Weapons Locker 7C when not in use, and kept suspended in a solution rich in calcium and protein to sustain its organic components. Only the research team assigned to SCP-127 is authorized to access it, and all interactions with the anomaly must be carefully monitored.